in the quiet moments. Have you ever felt it? A sense of being pulled in 1,000 different directions. Adrift in a relentless current of notifications, expectations, and the never-ending pursuit of more. We live in a world that shouts for our attention. A world of constant noise, both outside and inside our own minds, leaving us feeling overwhelmed, reactive, and disconnected from any real sense of tranquility. We chase after happiness as if it were a destination, a prize to be won after the next promotion, the next purchase, the next milestone, only to find that the finish line keeps moving. This frantic search for peace in external things is a profound and deeply human struggle, a silent anxiety that hums beneath the surface of our busy lives. We have been taught to build our homes on shifting sands, anchoring our sense of self-worth and contentment to things we ultimately cannot control: the opinions of others, the whims of fortune, the unpredictable nature of life itself. And so, we remain vulnerable, our inner peace held hostage by the very next email, the next headline, the next unexpected turn of events. But what if there was another way? What if the secret to an unshakable inner peace wasn't something you had to find, but something you could build? What if there existed a timeless, battle-tested philosophy, an ancient operating system for the human mind, designed specifically to cultivate resilience, purpose, and a profound sense of calm, regardless of the chaos that surrounds you? This is the promise of Stoicism, not as a dry academic subject, but as a practical, living art. It is a guide passed down from emperors, slaves, playwrights, and soldiers, who faced the same fundamental human challenges we face today: war, loss, political turmoil, and personal failure, and who forged from their experiences a set of tools for not just surviving, but thriving. This wisdom doesn't promise to change the world around you. It promises something far more powerful. It promises to fortify you from within, so that the world no longer has the power to break your inner peace. And in our modern age, accessing this profound wisdom has never been easier. We understand that your time is precious, that life is demanding. That's why we believe in the power of the audiobook, a format that allows these transformative ideas to become a part of your daily rhythm. You can learn to build your inner citadel while you commute to work. You can contemplate the nature of happiness while you're at the gym. You can absorb the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius while you do the dishes. This isn't about adding another task to your to-do list. It's about transforming the time you already have into moments of genuine insight and growth. It's about letting these powerful messages from the universe, captured in the words of the great Stoics, wash over you, slowly but surely rewiring your approach to life. Join us on this journey as we unlock the secrets of Stoicism and discover how this ancient philosophy holds the key to the durable, self-derived tranquility you have been searching for. This is the very first step, the foundational principle upon which the entire fortress of inner peace is built. If you grasp this one idea, truly and deeply, your life will begin to change. Not overnight, not in a flash of lightning, but in a slow, steady, and irreversible shift from anxiety to tranquility. It is the cornerstone of Stoic practice, a simple yet profoundly powerful mental tool known as the dichotomy of control. The great teacher Epictetus, a man who endured the brutalities of slavery to become one of antiquity's most influential philosophers, summarized it with beautiful simplicity. He said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us." Within that short sentence lies a key that can unlock you from the prison of worry, frustration, and fear. It is a diagnostic question you can apply to every single situation you will ever face. From the most trivial annoyance to the most profound tragedy, learning to make this distinction clearly and consistently is the first and most crucial task of the Stoic student. So, let us first examine the first part of that statement. The things that are up to us. What truly falls within our complete and total jurisdiction? The Stoics were incredibly precise about this. And the list is shorter than you might think. It does not include your job, your health, your relationships, or your bank account. The only things that are truly and completely up to us exist within the domain of our own mind. First, and most importantly, are our judgments, our opinions about things. Notice, it is not the events themselves, but our interpretation of those events. A traffic jam is not inherently terrible. It is simply a collection of stationary cars. Our judgment, our opinion that it is terrible, that it is ruining our day, is what causes our suffering. That judgment is entirely up to us. We can choose to see it as a catastrophe, or we can choose to see it as an opportunity to listen to an audiobook, to breathe, to simply be. The event is external. The judgment is internal. This is our sovereign kingdom. Next are our impulses, the choices to move toward or away from something, our desires and our aversions. We have the power to examine a desire before we act on it, to question whether it is truly good for us. We can choose to assent to an impulse, or to withhold that assent. The craving for junk food, the urge to say something unkind in a moment of anger, the desire for external validation. These are all impulses we have the power to inspect and, ultimately, to control. Finally, what is up to us are our own actions, the things we choose to do or say, guided by our judgments and impulses. This is our sphere of direct influence, the realm of our will. It may seem like a very small territory to claim, just our thoughts, oudesia, and our actions. But the Stoics understood that this small kingdom is the only one that truly matters. It is the source of all our power, the command center of our soul. Think of yourself as the captain of a ship. You cannot control the sea. You cannot command the winds. And you cannot predict the storms. To try and do so would be an act of pure madness, a recipe for constant frustration. But you can control the rudder. You can control how you adjust the sails. You can control the actions of your crew. Your job is not to command the ocean, but to command your ship in response to the ocean. That is where your power lies. And that is where your focus must be. Now, let's turn to the second, and much longer, list. The things that are not up to us. This is everything else. Absolutely everything outside of our own reasoned choice. This includes our body. You do not ultimately control when you get sick, how you age, or if you are predisposed to a certain condition. You can influence your health with diet and exercise, of course, but you cannot control it. A perfectly healthy person can receive a terrible diagnosis tomorrow. This is a fact of nature. It includes our possessions, your house, your car, your money. These can be taken from you at any moment by misfortune, by accident, by economic collapse. They are on loan from fortune. It most certainly includes your reputation. Your reputation is nothing more than a collection of thoughts residing in other people's minds. You cannot control what others think about you. No matter how perfectly you behave, they will judge you through the filter of their own biases, their own moods, and their own insecurities. To stake your peace of mind on controlling the thoughts of others is to build your house on the wind. This list continues. The actions of others are not up to us. You cannot control your spouse, your children, your boss, or your friends. You can speak to them. You can reason with them. You can be an example for them. But you cannot force them to act or think in a certain way. Their minds are their own sovereign kingdoms. The past is not up to us. It is written and sealed. The future is not up to us. It is a vast, unfolding consequence of infinite variables. The weather, the government, the economy, the very fact of our eventual death. All of these things are completely, totally, and irrevocably outside the sphere of our control. And here is the great secret to so much of our human misery. The simple diagnostic for our anxiety, nearly all of our negative emotions, our anger, our fear, our sadness, our frustration, arise from a fundamental error in thinking. They arise when we try to exert control over the things that are not up to us, while simultaneously neglecting the things that are. We get angry in traffic because we are trying to control the movement of thousands of other cars. We feel anxious before a public speech because we are trying to control the audience's reaction. We feel bitter about a past betrayal because we are trying to change what has already happened. We are behaving like the mad sea captain, screaming at the waves and cursing the wind, all while our hand is off the rudder and the sails are flapping uselessly. There is a powerful story that perfectly illustrates this principle. A story from the life of Epictetus himself. Before he was a famous teacher, he was a slave in the court of a wealthy and powerful secretary to the Emperor Nero, a man named Epaphroditus. As a slave, Epictetus's body was not his own. He could be beaten, sold, or even killed at his master's whim. He was, in the eyes of Roman law, a piece of property. One day, for some unknown reason, perhaps out of boredom or cruelty, Epaphroditus decided to torment Epictetus by twisting his leg. Epictetus, fully understanding the dichotomy of control, did not scream, or beg, or curse his master. He simply looked at him calmly and observed. "If you continue, you will break it." He was stating a simple fact, an external reality. He knew his leg was in his master's hands, not his own mind, his judgment, his inner calm, however, belonged only to him. Epaphroditus, likely enraged by this incredible composure, twisted harder, and the leg snapped. Again, Epictetus did not fly into a rage. He did not cry out in a fit of vengeful anger or self-pity. He just looked at his master, without malice, and said, "See, I told you it would break." In that moment, who was the slave and who was the master? Who was truly free? Epaphroditus, a man of immense power, was a slave to his own anger, his own cruelty, his own impulses. Epictetus, the man in chains with a broken leg, I was completely free. He had withdrawn his sense of self from his body, from his circumstances, and had placed it securely in the one place no one could ever touch, his own mind. He understood that his master could break his bones, but he could not break his spirit. He could control his body, but he could not control his response. This story is a profound meditation on the nature of true freedom. It is not about changing our circumstances. It is about changing our relationship to our circumstances. This principle is not just a historical curiosity. It is a practical tool for your daily life. It is a mental filter. From this moment forward, whenever you feel a negative emotion begin to rise, whether it's anxiety, anger, or despair, pause and ask the question, what part of this situation is up to me? And what part is not? If you are worried about an upcoming meeting, separate the two. The quality of your preparation, the clarity of your slides, the effort you put into practicing. That is up to you. Pour 100% of your energy into that. The client's final decision, the mood of your boss, a potential technical glitch with the projector. That is not up to you. To worry about those things is a waste of your precious and limited energy. Your task is to accept that reality and focus only on what you can control. This act of mental sorting is the great liberation. It is the feeling of putting down an impossibly heavy weight that you were never meant to carry in the first place. By focusing our efforts exclusively on our own thoughts and actions, we reclaim a sense of power and agency that is unshakable. We stop fighting unwinnable battles with reality itself. We stop being a victim of our circumstances and become the master of our responses. We find that when we let go of what we cannot control, we gain absolute control over what truly matters, our own inner peace. And once we have accepted that these external events are outside our control, we must then ask, what should our attitude toward them be? How do we face the things that fortune throws in our path? That leads us directly to our next great principle. The art of not just accepting our fate, but learning to love it, having firmly established the ground beneath our feet with the dichotomy of control. Understanding what is and is not ours to command, we arrive at the next, more radical step in our Stoic journey. If we are to accept that the vast majority of life, the unfolding of external events, is not up to us, then what should our relationship to these events be? Should we merely tolerate them? Should we grit our teeth and bear the hardships that fortune throws our way? The Stoics propose something far more powerful, far more transformative. They propose an attitude captured in a beautiful and daring Latin phrase, later made famous by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. But with its soul rooted deeply in Stoic thought, the phrase is amor fati. It means, quite literally, a love of one's fate. Now, it is crucial to understand that this is not passive resignation. It is not fatalism. It is not lying down like a doormat and letting the world walk all over you. Amor fati is an active, affirmative, and even joyful acceptance of everything that happens in your life. It is the practice of treating every single moment, every event, whether you initially perceive it as good or bad, as necessary, as désirable, even as a gift. It is the conscious decision to not just endure your life, but to embrace it in its entirety, without reservation. It means saying yes to it all. The triumphs and the tragedies, the joys and the sorrows, the successes and the failures. It is the ultimate expression of the principle we just discussed. Because if an event is truly not up to you, then what is the point of wishing it were different? To wish for reality to be other than it is to argue with the universe. It is a fight you can never win, and a source of constant, self-inflicted misery. Amor fati offers the alternative: to stop fighting, and instead, to dance with destiny. The Stoics could hold this seemingly radical view because they saw the universe, which they called the cosmos, as a single, rational, interconnected whole. They believed in a divine, organizing principle called the Logos, a sort of cosmic intelligence that pervades everything. From this view from above, every event, no matter how chaotic or painful it seems from our limited, ground-level perspective, is a necessary and perfect part of a much larger design. Imagine a vast and beautiful tapestry. If you were a single thread woven into that tapestry, you would only see the threads immediately around you. You might see knots, dark colors, and confusing patterns. You would have no concept of the magnificent image you are helping to create. Amor fati is the practice of trusting that you are an essential part of that grand design, that your specific path, with all its twists and turns, is exactly where it needs to be for the whole to be complete. To wish your fate were different would be to wish the tapestry itself were flawed. No one embodies this principle more completely than the emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Think of the world he inhabited. He was the most powerful man on earth. But his reign was not one of peace and prosperity. It was a relentless cascade of crises. He faced constant, brutal wars against Germanic tribes on the northern frontier. He presided over the devastating Antonine Plague, a pandemic that wiped out millions of Roman citizens, perhaps as much as a quarter of the empire. He dealt with economic turmoil, personal betrayals, including the rebellion of one of his most trusted generals, and the profound grief of losing many of his children, he had every excuse to be a bitter, resentful, and angry man, to curse the gods and his fate. Yet, in the private notes he wrote to himself, the book we now know as Meditations, we see a man actively, consistently practicing amor fati. He wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." He did not see obstacles as things that stopped him. He saw them as fuel. A difficult person was not a curse, but a chance to practice patience and understanding. A military setback was not a disaster, but a chance to practice resilience and strategy. The death of a loved one, while painful, was a chance to meditate on the nature of life and to practice courage. He instructed himself to accept everything that happens, even if it seems harsh, because it leads to this: the health of the universe. This is not the language of someone merely tolerating his life. This is the language of someone actively loving it, finding the good in the bad, and using every piece of his experience, no matter how jagged, to build his character. This is fundamentally different from the modern, often superficial idea of positive thinking. Positive thinking can sometimes involve a denial of reality, a refusal to see the bad, a kind of self-deception. Amor fati does the opposite. It looks reality squarely in the eye, acknowledges the pain, the difficulty, the ugliness, and it does not flinch. It says, "Yes, this is happening. This is real. This hurts. And I accept it. I embrace it. I will find a way to use it." It is an alchemy of the will, the ability to transmute pain into strength, fear into courage, and misfortune into opportunity. It is a declaration of spiritual independence. For if you can learn to love whatever happens to you, then what can possibly defeat you? Consider a more modern parable of this idea in action: the story of Thomas Edison and his long quest to invent a commercially viable electric light bulb. The popular narrative tells us that he failed 10,000 times before he finally succeeded. Imagine the frustration, imagine the mounting costs, the public skepticism, the sheer exhaustion of trying and failing, day after day. For years, most people would have given up. Most people would have lamented their fate, cursed their luck, and abandoned the project as a failure. But Edison's famous response to this supposed string of failures is a masterclass in amor fati. When asked about it, he reportedly said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This is not just a clever reframing. It is a fundamentally different philosophy of life. He did not see each burnt-out filament as a failure to be regretted. He saw it as a necessary and valuable piece of information to be welcomed. Each wrong step was not a setback. It was a step forward on the path of discovery. He loved the entire process, not just the hoped-for outcome. He embraced the so-called failures because he understood they were an inseparable part of his fate, an essential part of the journey toward his goal. He loved the struggle itself. So how can we begin to practice this in our own lives, which may not involve inventing world-changing technologies, but are filled with our own set of challenges? You can start with a simple exercise. Think back to a past event in your life that, at the time, felt like a major setback or a disaster. Perhaps it was losing a job you thought you loved, a painful breakup of a long-term relationship, a business venture that failed spectacularly. At the time, it was likely all-consuming, a source of great pain and anxiety. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, trace the consequences. Did losing that job push you onto a career path that ultimately proved to be far more fulfilling? Did the end of that relationship open the door to personal growth, newfound independence, or eventually, a partnership that was much healthier and more aligned with who you are? Did the lessons from that failed business become the bedrock of your future success? More often than not, we find that the most difficult chapters of our lives were the very things that forged our character, taught us invaluable lessons, and set us on a better course. The obstacle, in retrospect, truly did become the way. The goal of this exercise is to train your mind to apply this logic not just to the past, but to the present. The next time you face a challenge, a rejection, an unexpected problem, your first instinct might be to resist it, to say, "This shouldn't be happening." Try to replace that thought with the mantra of amor fati. Say, "This is happening. This is my material to work with. I accept it. What can I learn from this? How can I use this?" You welcome it as you would welcome a challenging workout at the gym. It is difficult. It is uncomfortable. But you know it is the very thing that will make you stronger. This is the art of loving your fate. It is the practice of seeing your life not as a series of disconnected, random events, but as a single, coherent, and meaningful story. And you are the hero of that story. You don't get to choose all the plot points, but you do get to choose to love the narrative, to see it all as necessary, and to play your part with courage, grace, and gratitude. By doing so, you build an inner resilience that is truly profound. But to fully embrace even the worst of fates, to love the possibility of tragedy, it is wise to prepare our minds for it in advance. This leads us to a core Stoic discipline, a powerful psychological tool for building that very resilience. The practice known as premeditatio malorum. If amor fati is the art of loving whatever happens to us, then how do we prepare ourselves for the harsher side of fate? How do we build the emotional and psychological fortitude to be able to look tragedy in the eye and not just accept it, but embrace it? It seems like a superhuman task. In our modern culture, we are conditioned to constantly focus on the positive, to visualize success, to affirm that everything will be all right. The Stoics, however, possessed a secret weapon, a mental tool that seems, at first glance, to be the complete opposite of this approach. It is a practice that is deeply counterintuitive, and yet, it is one of the most powerful techniques for generating profound gratitude and unshakable resilience. They called it premeditatio malorum. The premeditation, or rehearsal, of future evils. This is not pessimism. It is not about wallowing in negativity or living in a constant state of fear. It is strategic foresight. It is the art of negative visualization. The great Stoic writer Seneca described it as rehearsing for misfortune. Imagine a soldier who has never drilled, never practiced firing his weapon, never run through battle simulations. When he finally faces the terror and chaos of real combat, he will freeze. He will panic. He will be overcome. A soldier who has drilled relentlessly, however, who has rehearsed every possible scenario, will react with trained composure. His mind has already been there. The shock is gone. He can think clearly and act effectively. Premeditatio malorum is the civilian equivalent of that military drill. It is a form of psychological inoculation. By willingly exposing yourself to a small, controlled dose of imagined misfortune, you build up an immunity to the emotional devastation of real misfortune. As Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Nothing can truly break the person who has already considered the possibility of being broken. The unexpected blow is the one that lands with the greatest force. This practice aims to ensure that no blow is ever truly unexpected. So how does one practice this? It is a simple, private, mental exercise, perhaps best done for a few minutes each morning, before the world begins to make its demands on you. You begin by calmly and systematically contemplating the loss of the things you value. Start with your possessions. Look around your home and imagine it gone, perhaps in a fire or a flood. Imagine your car is stolen. Imagine your life savings disappear in a market crash. The goal is not to induce a panic attack. The goal is to follow the thought to its logical conclusion. What would you do? You would be devastated. Yes. But would you survive? Of course. You would. You would grieve the loss. And then you would begin to rebuild. You would realize that your true self, your character, your mind, would remain intact. You are more than your belongings. Then, you move to something more difficult, but infinitely more powerful. You contemplate the loss of your status and your abilities. Imagine being fired from your job. Imagine your reputation being unfairly ruined. Imagine a sudden illness that confines you to a bed, or an accident that takes away your ability to walk. Again, you follow the thought through. You would face immense challenges, but you would adapt. You would find new sources of strength. You would be forced to rely on your inner resources, your courage, your reason, your virtues. You would discover a resilience you never knew you possessed. Finally, you must approach the most difficult part of the practice. You gently contemplate the mortality of those you love most dearly. Your spouse, your parents, your children, your closest friends. Imagine, just for a moment, that your time with them has come to an end. This is not meant to be a morbid or cruel exercise. It has a very specific and beautiful purpose. In that moment of imagined loss, you will feel an overwhelming, heart-achingly powerful wave of love and gratitude for the fact that they are here, right now, alive and with you today. That feeling will change how you interact with them for the rest of the day. You will be less likely to take them for granted. You will be more patient, more present, more loving. You will hold them a little closer. You will forgive petty annoyances more easily. By meditating on their eventual absence, you make their present existence shine with an almost unbearable brightness. You learn to love them more fully. Right here, right now. After running through these visualizations, you emerge not in a state of depression, but with two profound feelings. First, a deep and visceral sense of gratitude for everything you currently have. A gratitude that is impossible to feel when you just assume everything will always be there. Second, you feel a quiet confidence, a sense of preparedness. You have faced the worst in your imagination, and you have seen that you can, in fact, survive. It is absolutely essential to distinguish this structured, rational exercise from the destructive, looping patterns of chronic anxiety. They are polar opposites. Anxiety is vague, emotional, and paralyzing. It is the mind spinning in circles, repeating, what if, without ever landing on an answer. It is a cloud of unfocused fear. Premeditatio malorum is specific, strategic, and empowering. It does not ask, what if something bad happens? It asks, what if this specific bad thing happens? What would be my rational response? What virtues would I need to call upon? What part of that situation would be within my control? Anxiety is being lost in the storm. Premeditatio malorum is the act of studying the charts, planning the route, and preparing the ship for the storm while the sea is still calm. A perfect modern analogy for this practice is the training of an astronaut. We see them as symbols of courage, venturing into the hostile void of space. But their courage is not born from a naive hope that everything will go perfectly. It is forged in thousands of hours spent in simulators. They don't just sit around thinking positive thoughts about their mission. They deliberately and repeatedly practice every conceivable disaster. Engine failure, computer systems crashing, cabin fires, micrometeoroid impacts. They run these drills over and over and over again, until the response to catastrophe becomes second nature. The purpose is not to make them terrified of space. The purpose is to strip the element of shock and surprise out of disaster, so that their response is not panic, but calm, trained, effective action. Premeditatio malorum is our personal mission simulator for life on Earth. By running these disaster scenarios in our own minds, we are training ourselves to be the astronaut, not the passenger. when our own inevitable crises occur. The benefits of this regular, brief practice are immense. It systematically dismantles your fear of loss, because you come to understand on a deep level that your core well-being is not dependent on external things. It builds genuine psychological resilience, strengthening your mental and emotional muscles so they are ready when you need them. And most beautifully, it is perhaps the single most effective gratitude practice ever conceived. You simply cannot contemplate losing something you love without feeling an intense appreciation for its presence in your life. It is the cure for the modern disease of taking everything for granted. When you have imagined life without your health, every healthy breath you take becomes a gift. When you have imagined life without your loved ones, every moment with them becomes precious. It clarifies what is truly important, stripping away the trivial anxieties and focusing your mind on the unshakable core of your own character. Far from being a dark and pessimistic practice, this premeditation of adversity is a secret path to appreciating the profound beauty and fragility of the present moment. It prepares us for the worst, so that we may live our very best. And by rehearsing for these external misfortunes, we naturally begin to focus on building an internal fortress that can withstand any siege. Which leads us directly to our next subject, the concept of the inner citadel. After preparing our minds for the inevitable hardships of life through the practice of premeditatio malorum, we must ask, where do we go to find the strength to endure them? When the storms of fortune rage, where is our shelter? When the world outside becomes a battlefield of chaos and anxiety, where is our sanctuary of peace? The Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius in particular, offer a powerful and beautiful answer in the form of a metaphor. The concept of the inner citadel. He urged himself, time and again in his private meditations, to build your inner citadel. He envisioned the human mind as a fortress, an unbreachable stronghold high upon a hill, to which we can retreat at any moment. No matter what is happening outside, whether you are facing a literal army on the battlefield, a political betrayal in the Senate, or the quiet grief of a personal loss, you can, at any time, withdraw into this internal fortress and find absolute tranquility, clarity, and security. It is vital, first, to understand what this citadel is not. It is not a call for emotional suppression. It is not about building walls around your heart and refusing to feel. The Stoic does not deny pain, or fear, or sorrow. These are natural human reactions. The citadel is also not a place for dissociation or a cowardly escape from the problems of the world. The goal is not to hide from reality. Rather, it is a strategic retreat to gain perspective on reality. Think of it like a general climbing to a watchtower in the middle of a chaotic battle. He doesn't leave the battlefield. He rises above it for a moment to see the whole picture, to distinguish what is important from what is merely noise, so he can re-engage with the fight more effectively, with strategy and purpose instead of panic and reactivity. Your inner citadel is your mind's watchtower. It is the quiet, rational center from which you can observe the chaos of life without being consumed by it. So, if this citadel is so crucial, what is it made of? How do we build this fortress? It is not built of stone and mortar, but of principles and virtues. The very foundation upon which the entire structure rests is the dichotomy of control, the unwavering understanding of what is and is not in our power. This is the bedrock. If the ground beneath your fortress is unstable, if you are still trying to control the uncontrollable, the walls will crumble at the first sign of trouble. But once that foundation is solid, you can begin to build the walls, brick by brick. Each Stoic principle you learn and internalize is another stone in that wall. Amor fati is a thick, impenetrable section of the wall, the understanding that everything that happens can be used as fuel. Premeditatio malorum is the reinforced gatehouse, always prepared for a potential siege. Memento mori, the remembrance of death, is the high parapet that gives you a clarifying view of what truly matters in the grand scheme of things. At the very heart of the citadel stands the keep, the highest and most secure tower. This is your faculty of reason, the divine spark of logos within you. This is your command center. From this watchtower of reason, you can practice what the Stoics called the discipline of assent. You can look down upon the events of the world and the impressions they create in your mind. An insult is thrown your way. A piece of bad news arrives. A plan goes awry. From the watchtower, you don't immediately react. You observe the impression. You analyze it. You ask, is this thing truly harmful to my character? Does it impact my ability to be a good person? From the calm perspective of reason, you see that words are just vibrations in the air, that external events have no power to harm your inner self unless you grant them that power by assenting to the impression that you have been harmed. And finally, who garrisons this fortress? Who are the soldiers that patrol its walls and defend it from attack? These are the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Every time you act with courage in the face of fear, you strengthen the garrison. Every time you choose to act with justice and fairness towards others, you reinforce the gates. Every time you exercise temperance and self-control, you shore up the defenses. Your character is the army that defends your peace of mind. Building this fortress is not a passive activity. It is the work of a lifetime, a daily training regimen for the soul. An untrained mind is like an open field, vulnerable to every passing whim, emotion, and external influence. A fortified mind must be built with deliberate, consiste effort. This construction happens through daily philosophical practice. It happens when you read the great Stoic texts, not as mere intellectual exercises, but as blueprints from the master architects, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. It happens when you engage in journaling, creating your own philosophical diary. This practice is the equivalent of the daily inspection of the walls. You review the events of the day, not to dwell on them, but to analyze your reactions. Where did my defenses hold strong today? Where was there a breach? Where did I let an emotional reaction get the better of me? What can I do to reinforce that section tomorrow? This constant self-examination and self-correction is the hard work of fortification. The ability to retreat to your citadel in a moment of crisis depends entirely on the work you have put in during times of peace. For a powerful, real-world example of an impregnable inner citadel, we need look no further than the life of Nelson Mandela. Consider his circumstances. For 27 years, he was imprisoned, much of that time spent in a tiny cell on the brutal Robben Island. His captors controlled every aspect of his external world. His food, his labor, his contact with the outside world, his physical freedom. They subjected him to grueling physical hardship and constant psychological abuse, all designed to break his spirit. By every external measure, he was powerless. Yet, Mandela refused to be a prisoner in his own mind. Instead of allowing his spirit to atrophy, he began to build. His body was confined to a few square feet of stone and concrete, but his mind was free. He disciplined himself rigorously. He studied. He exercised. He wrote. He famously learned Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, not as an act of submission, but as an act of strategic power, to understand their mindset and to be able to reason with them one day. He and his fellow inmates turned the prison quarry into a university, debating politics, history, and philosophy, keeping their minds sharp and their purpose clear. He refused to allow bitterness and hatred to become the masters of his inner world. When he finally walked out of that prison after 27 years, he was not the broken, vengeful man his captors had tried to create. He was a leader of immense moral stature, wisdom, and profound tranquility. A man capable of forgiving his enemies and healing a fractured nation. His body had been in a cage, but his mind had been residing in an unbreachable inner citadel. He is perhaps the ultimate testament to the Stoic truth that our point of power is not in our circumstances, but in our response to our circumstances. This is the promise of the inner citadel. It is the source of true self-reliance, when your sense of security is based on your job, your relationships, or your possessions. You are perpetually vulnerable, because all of those things can be taken away. But when your security is based on the strength of your own mind, on your character, on your ability to reason and act with virtue, then you are truly safe. You become the eye of the storm. The winds can howl, the waves can crash, but your center remains calm and still. You know that you can lose everything in the external world and still retain the one thing that truly matters: your own soul. The construction of this fortress is our birthright as rational beings, and it is the great work of our lives. Its foundation is our principles. Its walls are our wisdom, and its defenders are our virtues. It is these virtues, the very garrison of our inner peace, that we must now turn our attention to understand them in full. If the inner citadel is our fortress, the place of unbreachable peace within us, then what are the laws that govern this inner kingdom? What is the code of conduct for the person who resides there? For the Stoics, the answer was simple, profound, and absolute. The law of the inner kingdom is the law of virtue. In our modern world, we are taught to pursue many things we call good: wealth, health, pleasure, reputation, success. We organize our lives around acquiring these things, believing that they are the primary components of a happy life. The Stoics looked at this list and made a radical claim, one that is perhaps the most challenging and important in their entire philosophy. They claimed that none of these things are truly good in themselves. They are indifference. They are external. They are fleeting. And they are ultimately outside of our complete control. The only thing that is truly, unequivocally good, the Stoics argued, is virtue, a good character, and the actions that flow from that character is the sole good. It is the North Star of a well-lived life, the ultimate goal, or summum bonum, towards which all our efforts should be aimed. This may sound abstract, but the Stoics made it intensely practical by breaking down this concept of virtue into 4 cardinal points. Think of them as the 4 directions on a moral compass. In any situation, no matter how confusing, no matter how stressful, no matter how tempting, you can consult this inner compass. It will always show you the way. It will always guide you toward your true north, which is living with excellence and integrity. These 4 virtues are wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. They are not separate qualities to be collected like trophies. They are 4 facets of a single, unified state of being. You cannot truly have one without the others. They work in concert, supporting and balancing each other to create a harmonious and resilient character. They are the soldiers that garrison your inner citadel. And it is our task now to get to know each of them personally. The first and chief of the virtues is wisdom. In the Stoic sense, wisdom is not about having a high IQ, or possessing a vast amount of trivia, or being book smart. It is a far deeper and more practical quality. The Stoics called it Sophia or phronesis, and it is the knowledge of how to live. It is the master virtue that guides all the others. Wisdom is the ability to navigate the complex situations of life with clarity, logic, and perspective. It is the knowledge of what is truly good, what is truly bad, and what is merely indifferent. It is the operating system that runs the dichotomy of control, allowing you to effortlessly distinguish between what you can change and what you must accept. It's the ability to see a situation for what it is, not what your fears or desires want it to be. When you are faced with a professional setback, wisdom is what allows you to see it not as a career-ending disaster, but as a change in external circumstances that presents new challenges and opportunities. It is the rational faculty that resides in your watchtower, analyzing your impressions before they can fester into full-blown emotional reactions. Without wisdom, courage becomes recklessness, justice can be misapplied, and temperance can become mere stinginess. Wisdom is the captain of the ship, charting the course through the turbulent waters of life. The second virtue is justice. This, too, is a concept the Stoics understood in a much broader sense than we do today. Justice, or dikaiosine, is not just about laws in courtrooms. It is the virtue of our relationships with others. It is about acting with fairness, integrity, kindness, decency, and respect towards every fellow human being. This virtue stems directly from the Stoic belief in sympathia, the idea that we are all interconnected, all parts of a single cosmic organism. We are all brothers and sisters in the human community. To act unjustly, to be selfish, to cheat, to harm another person, is to act against our own nature. It is like the left hand deciding to injure the right hand, foolishly forgetting that they are part of the same body. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, constantly had to remind himself of this. He didn't see his role as one of power and privilege, but as one of duty. His justice was his obligation to serve the common good of the Roman people. For us, justice is practiced in our daily lives. It is how we treat our family and our colleagues. It is our honesty in business dealings. It is the respect we show to the barista, the janitor, the person we disagree with online. It is the recognition of the divine spark of reason in every other person, and treating them accordingly. The third virtue is courage. The Greek word, andreia, originally meant manliness, but the Stoics expanded it to mean something far more profound than mere physical bravery. For a Stoic, moral courage is far more important than physical courage. It is the strength to face reality as it is, without illusion or complaint. It is the courage to do the right thing, even when it is difficult, unpopular, or frightening. It is the quiet endurance that allows you to face a scary medical diagnosis with composure, to have that difficult but necessary conversation with a loved one, to admit when you have made a mistake, to stand up for your principles when they are being challenged. This is the virtue that underpins the practice of premeditatio malorum. It takes courage to look at the worst-case scenarios, to contemplate loss and mortality. But like a muscle, this moral courage grows stronger every time you use it. The Roman senator Cato, the Younger, became a legend for his unwavering courage. He stood against the rising tyranny of Julius Caesar, not with armies, but with the force of his character and his absolute refusal to compromise his principles. He ultimately chose to take his own life rather than live under a dictator, becoming an eternal symbol of the courage to place one's integrity above all else. The fourth and final virtue is temperance, sophrosyne. In Greek, this is the virtue of self-mastery, discipline, moderation, and balance. If justice governs our actions with others, temperance governs our relationship with ourselves, with our own desires and appetites, in a world that constantly bombards us with temptations for more. Temperance is the ability to say, enough. It is about mastering our desires, rather than being enslaved by them. This applies to everything: food, drink, sleep, sex, wealth, fame, pleasure. The goal is not to eliminate these things, as they are indifferents, but to engage with them in a healthy, balanced, and disciplined way. Temperance is the strength to resist the urge to lash out in anger, to moderate your pursuit of wealth so that it doesn't consume you, to put down your fork when you are full. It is the discipline that allows you to build and maintain your inner citadel. Seneca, despite his immense wealth, was a great practitioner of temperance. He would often intentionally live as a poor man for several days, eating simple food and sleeping on a hard mat. He did this not because he disliked his wealth, but to constantly remind himself that he did not need it for his happiness. He was ensuring that he was the master of his possessions, and not the other way around. These four virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, form a complete and holistic system for a life of excellence. They are the four pillars that hold up a good life, the ultimate goal of a Stoic. The state of eudaimonia is not a feeling of giddy happiness that comes from external success. It is the deep, abiding tranquility and satisfaction that comes from knowing you are living in accordance with your highest self. It is the peace that comes from a clear conscience, from knowing that in any situation, you consulted your moral compass and you acted with wisdom, with justice, with courage, and with temperance. The reward for virtue is not some prize at the end of life. The reward for virtue is the act of living virtuously itself, moment by moment. It is the inner peace that cannot be bought, sold, or taken away. And living by this compass requires us to broaden our perspective, to see that our individual actions have a place in a much larger picture. It requires us to understand our deep connection to the entire cosmos, a concept the Stoics called sympathia, having established the four virtues as the internal compass that guides our actions. The Stoics invite us to take a step back, to zoom out from our individual lives and contemplate our place in the grand scheme of things. This is where we encounter one of the most beautiful, awe-inspiring, and profoundly comforting concepts in their entire philosophy. It is the idea of sympathia. The word comes from Greek, combining sim, meaning together, with pathos, meaning feeling or experience. It literally means to feel together, to experience together. It is the recognition that the entire universe, the entire cosmos, is a single, living, interconnected organism, and that we are not isolated individuals, but integral parts of this magnificent whole. This perspective is the ultimate antidote to the feelings of loneliness, alienation, and selfishness that so often plague our modern lives. The Stoics believed that the universe was permeated and governed by a universal reason, a divine intelligence they called the Logos. You can think of the Logos as the DNA of the cosmos, the underlying operating system that guides the growth of a tree, the orbit of a planet, the formation of a galaxy, and the development of human consciousness. Because this single, rational force flows through everything, it means that everything is connected to everything else. The Stoics frequently use the analogy of a body to explain this. The universe is like a single body, and all of us are the individual limbs and organs: a hand, a foot, an eye, a heart. They all have their own specific functions. They are all distinct parts, yet they are completely unified in a common purpose: the health and well-being of the entire organism. The hand does not hoard blood for itself. It works to support the whole body, knowing that its own health depends on the health of the whole. This is the essence of sympathia, as Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, in what is perhaps the most famous summary of this idea: what is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee. This is not just a beautiful piece of poetry or abstract metaphysics. This worldview has profound and intensely practical ethical implications. It is the very foundation of the virtue of justice we just discussed. Our duty to be kind, fair, and helpful to other people is not just a social nicety or a rule we follow to avoid punishment. It is a cosmic duty. When we understand sympathia, we realize that to harm another person, to cheat them, to act with malice towards them, is an act of cosmic ignorance. It is as foolish and self-destructive as the left hand deciding to take a hammer and smash the right hand. You are attacking a part of your own larger self. This perspective fundamentally changes how we view conflict and difficult people. When someone irritates you or even harms you, the standard reaction is anger and a desire for retribution. But from the perspective of sympathia, you see them not as an enemy, but as a disconnected part of your own body, a part that is malfunctioning. Perhaps they are acting out of fear, ignorance, or pain, as Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself. His task was to see even the most frustrating people as his kin, members of the same human family who shared the same spark of divine reason, even if theirs was temporarily clouded. The correct response, then, is not anger, but an attempt to understand, to teach, to heal, and to gently guide them back towards reason and connection. Furthermore, this sense of cosmic connection is a powerful remedy for the feeling of meaninglessness that can haunt us in a seemingly vast and indifferent universe. The view of sympathia tells us that we are not insignificant accidents. We are not lonely atoms drifting in a meaningless void. We are each an essential, necessary thread in the magnificent tapestry of existence. Your life has an inherent purpose, and that purpose is to play your part well, to contribute to the health and functioning of the whole. Whether you are an emperor, a craftsman, a parent, or a friend, your role is to serve the human community, the swarm, to the best of your ability. This infuses every action, no matter how small, with a sense of dignity and purpose. To make this idea more concrete, imagine a complex forest ecosystem. Within that forest, everything is connected in an intricate, delicate web of life. The tall canopy of the oak trees provides the shade that allows the ferns on the forest floor to grow. When the oak leaves fall, they decompose, and with the help of fungi and bacteria, they enrich the soil, providing nutrients for all the plants around them. The bees fly from flower to flower, collecting nectar for themselves. But in doing so, they perform the vital task of pollination, allowing the plants to reproduce. The fungi in the soil form vast underground networks, transporting water and nutrients between different trees, a hidden circulatory system for the entire forest. Now, imagine if one of the oak trees, in an act of supreme ignorance, decided it wanted all the sunlight and all the water for itself. Imagine it tried to poison the fungi at its roots and choke out all the smaller plants around it. How foolish and self-destructive that would be. In its selfish quest for dominance, it would inevitably destroy the very ecosystem that nourishes it, leading to its own demise. Human society is no different. Greed, selfishness, tribalism, cruelty. These are the actions of that ignorant tree. Sympathia is the ecological wisdom of the soul, the understanding that our own well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of everyone and everything around us. So how can we cultivate this perspective in our own lives? The Stoics offered practical exercises. One of the most famous is a meditation known as taking the view from above. You start by visualizing yourself in the room you are in. Then, you imagine your consciousness floating upwards, looking down on your house, then your neighborhood, or your city. You keep rising, seeing your country as a patch on the globe, then the entire, beautiful, blue marble of Earth suspended in the blackness of space. You see the continents, the oceans, the swirls of clouds. You then float further out, past the moon, past the other planets in our solar system, until our sun is just another star among billions in the Milky Way galaxy, which itself is just one of countless galaxies in the vast, silent expanse of the universe. From this cosmic perspective, what happens to your anxieties? What happens to your ego? Your grudges, your petty concerns, they shrink to their proper, insignificant size. You see all of humanity below, a single teeming family on a tiny speck of dust. And the divisions and conflicts that seem so important on the ground become utterly absurd. On a more daily level, you can practice what might be called the kin contemplation. As you go about your day, look at the people you encounter, the stranger on the bus, your colleague at work, the person in line in front of you. And as you look at them, silently repeat to yourself the Stoic mantra, "This person is my kin. They are a part of the same whole as I am. They share in the same universal reason. They have hopes, fears, and dreams, just as I do. They are another part of me." This simple, silent practice can begin to dissolve the walls of separation we build around ourselves, fostering a sense of compassion and shared humanity. This shift in perspective, from me versus them to a unified we, is the essence of sympathia. It is the great cure for the ego. It is the recognition that service to others is ultimately service to ourselves. And when we truly grasp this deep, cosmic connection, we begin to see that destructive emotions like anger are not just unhelpful. They are profoundly irrational. They are a denial of our most fundamental nature. This understanding provides the perfect foundation for our next topic, a deep and practical examination of how a Stoic tames the beast of anger. If the idea of sympathia teaches us that we are all interconnected parts of a single whole, then what is the most profound way we deny that reality? What is the emotion that shatters connection, isolates us from others, and lays waste to our own inner peace? There is one clear culprit, an emotion the Stoics saw not as a source of strength, but as the most toxic and destructive force in the human soul. That emotion is anger. It is a seductive and powerful beast. It can feel righteous. It can feel energizing. It can masquerade as a demand for justice. But as the Stoic philosopher Seneca argued in his brilliant essay, De Ira, or On Anger, it is nothing more than a temporary madness, an acid that corrodes the vessel that contains it far more than anything upon which it is poured. Taming this beast is not an optional exercise for the aspiring Stoic. It is an essential and non-negotiable battle for the preservation of your own soul. To defeat an enemy, you must first understand it. The Stoics performed a brilliant diagnosis of anger, tracing it back to its root cause, which, like so many of our troubles, lies not in external events but in a series of flawed judgments. The chain reaction begins with a simple perception. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A colleague takes credit for your work. A loved one says something hurtful. The first flawed judgment we make is, "I have been harmed." We personalize the event and feel that our self, our status, or our dignity has been injured. A Stoic would immediately challenge this. Has your character been harmed? Has your ability to be a virtuous person been taken away? Or has your ego merely been pricked? More often than not, it is the latter. The second faulty judgment quickly follows. This harm was done intentionally and wrongfully. We automatically assume malice. We create a story in which the other person is a villain who set out with the express purpose of hurting us. The Stoics, drawing from Socrates, would offer a different interpretation. That people generally do wrong, not out of pure evil, but out of ignorance. They are mistaken about what will bring them happiness or fulfillment. The person who stole your idea is ignorant of the fact that true self-worth comes from integrity, not stolen praise. From this perspective, their action is pitiable, not just infuriating, but it is the third and final judgment that truly unleashes the beast. We conclude, retaliation is the appropriate and necessary response. We believe that lashing out, whether with sharp words, a vengeful action, or a simmering grudge, will somehow balance the scales and restore our sense of justice. This, the Stoics argue, is the ultimate delusion. Anger has never made a situation better. It only pours fuel on the fire, escalating conflict, damaging relationships, and, most importantly, completely demolishing our own inner tranquility. The act of rage surrenders the keys of our inner citadel to someone else, allowing their actions to dictate our own peace of mind. Seneca, writing to his own brother, Novatus, who was troubled by his temper, offered a series of brilliant and practical strategies for dealing with this fever of the mind. His single greatest piece of advice: The master remedy for anger is delay. When you feel that hot flush of rage begin to rise, do nothing. Give it no outlet. Create a space between the stimulus and your response. If you can, leave the room. Go for a walk. If you are about to send an angry email, save it as a draft and look at it the next morning. Time is the enemy of anger. Rage is a fire that needs immediate fuel to burn. And if you deny it that fuel, it will almost always burn itself out. In the cool light of the next day, reason has a chance to reassert itself, and the perceived slight often reveals itself to be trivial. Another of Seneca's powerful techniques was to deliberately seek out the most charitable interpretation of events. Instead of defaulting to the assumption of malice, actively work to find an alternative story. That person who cut you off in traffic, perhaps they are not a jerk, but a panicked father rushing his sick child to the hospital. That friend who made an insensitive comment, perhaps they are exhausted from a lack of sleep and spoke carelessly, and would be horrified if they knew they had hurt you. This practice systematically starves your anger of the stories it needs to survive. Seneca even suggested a starkly practical tool. When you are angry, go and look at your own face in a mirror. See the contorted features, the ugly mask of rage that has replaced your normal face. Is that who you want to be? This simple visual feedback can be a shocking and effective reminder of the disfigured state anger reduces us to. Imagine this conversation between Seneca and his brother. We can see Novatus, a powerful Roman official, coming to his philosopher brother, confessing, "I am consumed by this anger. It disrupts my judgment. It damages my reputation. It brings me no peace." And we can hear Seneca's firm but loving counsel. "Brother, you call this anger a sign of strength. It is the very definition of weakness. A great mind, like a great star, is always calm and steady in its course. This rage is a disease, a temporary madness. Do you want to punish the person who wronged you? The greatest punishment, the most profound revenge, is to prove that you are not like them. They are out of control. So, you must be in control. They are irrational. So you must be rational. By refusing to descend to their level, you win the only victory that matters, the victory over yourself. Ultimately, however, managing anger is not enough. The Stoic goal is to dissolve it completely through a profound philosophical shift. This leads us to the ultimate cure: forgiveness. It is essential to understand that forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is a fundamentally selfish act. We do not forgive others for their sake. They may not deserve it. They may never apologize. We forgive them for our sake. Holding onto a grudge, nursing a resentment, is like drinking a cup of poison and waiting for the other person to die. It only harms you. It occupies precious space in your mind. It steals your peace. It keeps you chained to a past event. Forgiveness is the act of putting down that cup of poison. It is the unilateral declaration that you will no longer allow another person's past actions to disturb your present tranquility. It is an act of reclaiming your power. This ties directly back to our understanding of sympathia. If we are all interconnected parts of one body, then holding a grudge is like having a festering wound that we constantly pick at blows. Refusing to allow it to heal, it poisons the entire system. When you see the person who wronged you not as an enemy, but as an ignorant, malfunctioning part of your own larger self, forgiveness becomes the only logical response. You wouldn't stay angry at your own hand for stumbling. You would seek to heal it and guide it better in the future. We can practice this by internalizing the Socratic idea that people do wrong because they are ignorant of the good. The person who betrayed you did so because they foolishly believed that betrayal would bring them some advantage or happiness. They were wrong. Their action has likely brought them more inner turmoil than it has you. Seeing them as misguided and confused, rather than purely evil, transforms hot anger into a cooler sense of pity or compassion. Anger is a choice. It is a cognitive habit, a story we tell ourselves about what has happened. And like any habit, it can be broken. It requires vigilance. It requires practice. And it requires a commitment to protecting your own inner peace above the fleeting, toxic satisfaction of rage. Taming this beast is one of the most important battles you will ever fight, because the prize is your own tranquility. This constant work of observing our emotions, analyzing our judgments, and correcting our internal course requires a dedicated daily practice. It requires a tool for self-examination, which leads us to one of the most essential habits of a practicing Stoic, the philosophical diary. Having learned to tame the inner beast of anger, we must now ask, how do we maintain this state of inner calm? How do we track our progress, correct our course, and ensure that the principles of Stoicism are not just ideas we admire, but habits we embody? To translate philosophy from theory into practice requires a workshop, a laboratory for the self, for the Stoics, and for countless thinkers, leaders, and artists throughout history. That workshop has been a simple notebook and pen. We are talking about the practice of the philosophical diary, a practice that is not about merely recording the events of your day, but about actively engaging in a conversation with the most important person you will ever know, yourself. This is not a passive chronicle. It is an active training ground, the single most effective tool for forging a resilient and virtuous character. There is no greater testament to the power of this practice than the book we now call Meditations. This text, which has guided and comforted millions for nearly 2,000 years, was never intended for you or me to read. It was the private journal of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Imagine him, at the end of a long day, sitting in his tent on the cold, dark frontier of Germania. He wasn't writing a masterpiece of literature. He was a tired, stressed man, surrounded by war, plague, and the immense burden of ruling an empire. He was writing to himself. For himself. He was coaching himself, reminding himself of his Stoic principles, wrestling with his own frustrations, his own moments of weakness, his own despair. The book is repetitive for a reason, because he needed to repeat the lessons to himself day after day. It is filled with self-criticism because he was honestly trying to be a better man. Meditations is not a polished philosophical treatise. It is a raw, intimate look at what the work of Stoicism actually looks like. The messy, difficult, daily struggle of self-mastery. This reveals the true purpose of the philosophical diary. Its goal is not to record what happened, but to analyze how you responded to what happened. The Stoic journal is a replay booth for your soul. You can go back to a moment of friction during your day, a disagreement with a colleague, a surge of anxiety about the future, a pang of envy, and you can dissect it. What was the trigger? What was the automatic judgment I made? Did I let my impressions run wild? Or did I pause and consult my reason? This practice is about catching your own flawed judgments in the act. It is a space to reinforce your principles, to write down a quote from Seneca or Epictetus that resonates with you, and to explain what it means in the context of your own life. The act of writing it down, of translating it into your own words, is what moves a principle from a vague idea in your head into a solid brick in your inner citadel. To make this practice concrete, we can adopt a two-part structure that many Stoics, past and present, have found effective. It involves a brief session in the morning to prepare for the day, and a brief session in the evening to review it. Think of it as a pre-flight and post-flight check for your mind. The morning session is about preparation. It's about setting the philosophical weather for your day before the storms roll in. First, you can practice a brief premeditatio malorum. What challenges are you likely to face today? A difficult meeting, a frustrating commute, a tedious task. Spend a moment visualizing these things and rehearse your ideal response. A response of calm, reason, and patience. Second, you set a clear intention. Choose a virtue you want to focus on. You might write, "Today, My goal is to practice courage. I will speak up in my meeting, even if my voice shakes. Or, today, my focus is temperance. I will be mindful of what I eat and avoid mindless scrolling on my phone. This gives your day a clear, virtuous purpose. Finally, you can briefly reflect on sympathia, reminding yourself that you are part of a larger whole, preparing you to act with justice and kindness towards the people you will encounter. Then, in the evening, comes the review. This is where the real learning happens. Here, we can use a powerful three-question framework that has been passed down since the time of the Pythagoreans. You sit down with your journal and ask yourself, with unsparing but non-judgmental honesty, first, what did I do wrong? Where did I fall short of my own philosophy today? Where did I let anger get the better of me? Where did I act out of fear or cowardice? Where was I lazy or unjust? You must be specific. Don't just write, I got angry. Write, when my colleague criticized my report, I made the judgment that he was attacking my intelligence, and I responded with a sarcastic comment. My anger was rooted in ego, and my response was unjust. This is not about beating yourself up. It is about taking a clear-eyed inventory. Second, you ask, what did I do right? This is equally important. Where did my training succeed? Was there a moment when I felt anger rising, but I paused, took a breath, and chose a rational response instead? Did I show patience when I would normally have shown frustration? Acknowledge your victories, no matter how small. This builds momentum and reinforces the right habits. You might write, I felt anxious about the uncertainty of the project, but I reminded myself to focus only on what I could control, which was the quality of my own work. I successfully distinguished between externals and my own volition. And third, if you ask, what duty was left undone? This is about identifying missed opportunities for virtue. Was there a chance to be more helpful to a coworker? Could I have been more present and listened more attentively to my partner? Did I miss an opportunity to stand up for my principles? Again, the goal is not guilt, but awareness. It's about sharpening your eye for opportunities to be a better person tomorrow. This simple, 10-minute practice, done consistently, is utterly transformative. The benefits are immense. It cultivates a profound sense of self-awareness. You begin to see your own mental patterns and emotional triggers with stunning clarity. It provides a safe and constructive outlet for your emotions, as the act of writing down your fears and frustrations often robs them of their power. It dramatically accelerates your learning and personal growth by creating a powerful daily feedback loop, and it brings clarity to your thinking, as the process of converting a jumble of thoughts into coherent written sentences forces you to understand them properly. This practice is the ultimate act of self-respect. It is the tangible proof that you are serious about your own development. It is the workshop where you are the craftsman and your character is the material, day by day, entry by entry. You are sanding down your rough edges, strengthening your weaknesses, and building a self that you can be proud of. It is in this workshop of honest self-reflection that we often discover one of our most persistent and troublesome internal enemies, a deep and powerful craving for the approval and applause of others. This brings us to our next great challenge: learning to free ourselves from the need for external validation. In our journey inward, after building our citadel and taming our inner beasts, we inevitably run into one of the most heavily fortified enemy camps on the battlefield of the mind. It is a prison with invisible bars, a master whose approval we crave and whose disapproval we dread. This is our deep, primal, and often unconscious need for the validation of others. It is the desire for applause, for likes, for praise, for a good reputation. This instinct is wired into our social DNA. For our ancient ancestors, being cast out from the tribe meant certain death. So fitting in and being well regarded was a survival mechanism. But in our modern world, this instinct has metastasized into a source of profound anxiety and a formidable barrier to genuine tranquility. We silence our own opinions. We alter our own desires. We chase promotions we don't truly want and buy things we don't truly need, all in a desperate attempt to manage the thoughts that exist inside other people's heads. We have, in effect, made the entire world our jury, and our own peace of mind is the price we pay for a favorable verdict. From a Stoic perspective, this entire enterprise is based on a fundamental and catastrophic error. It is the error of mistaking a preferred indifferent for a true good. Let us return to our foundational principle, the dichotomy of control. Where do the opinions of other people fall? They fall squarely, unequivocally, into the category of things that are not up to us. You can be the kindest, most brilliant, most virtuous person on earth, and someone will still dislike you. I misunderstand you, or slander you. Their thoughts are a product of their own mind, their own experiences, their own moods, and their own insecurities. Trying to control what other people think about you is as futile and as maddening as trying to command the tides to stop. You have willingly staked your own happiness on a variable that is completely outside of your jurisdiction. You have handed the keys to your inner citadel to a fickle and unpredictable crowd. The philosopher Epictetus, who knew a thing or two about true freedom, offered some bracing and radical advice on this subject. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." This is a shocking statement in a world obsessed with image and intelligence. But what did he mean? He meant that the path of philosophy, the path of genuine self-improvement, will inevitably lead you to behave in ways that look strange to the outside world. When you stop chasing money, when you stop caring about fame, when you start prioritizing tranquility and virtue above all else, the people still playing the conventional game will not understand you. They may see your newfound calm as laziness, your self-control as weird, your lack of ambition for external things as foolish. To be truly free, Epictetus argues, you must be utterly indifferent to this judgment. You must be willing to be misunderstood by those who are still trapped in the prison you are trying to escape. This leads us to a powerful way of reframing our lives. The choice between living by an external scorecard or an internal scorecard. Most of the world operates on an external scorecard. Their sense of worth rises and falls with their job title, the size of their house, the number of followers they have, the praise they get from their boss. It is a life of constant volatility, a desperate dance to please an ever-shifting audience. The Stoic, by contrast, resolves to live by a single, unwavering internal scorecard. The only opinion that truly matters is their own, held up against the high standard of their own principles. The questions on this internal scorecard are not, what did they think of me, but what did I do? Did I act with wisdom and reason today? Did I treat others with justice and fairness? Did I face my challenges with courage? Did I practice self-control and moderation? If you can look at your day and answer yes to these questions, you have succeeded, even if the world dismisses you. If you have to answer no, you have failed, even if the world gives you a standing ovation. This is the only path to a durable, unshakable sense of self-worth. For a memorable, if extreme, illustration of this principle, we can look to the figure of Diogenes, the Cynic. While not technically a Stoic, the Stoics deeply admired him as a role model of spiritual freedom. Diogenes lived this principle of indifference to opinion in the most literal way imaginable. He owned almost nothing. Living in a large clay jar in the marketplace of Athens, he openly mocked social conventions he found foolish. He would carry a lit lantern in the middle of the day, and when people asked what he was doing, he would reply, "I am looking for an honest man." The most famous story about him involves an encounter with the most powerful man on the planet, Alexander the Great. Alexander, who had conquered most of the known world, was fascinated by this strange philosopher. He approached Diogenes as he was sunbathing and, standing over him, offered to grant him any favor he desired. Diogenes, without even sitting up, simply looked at the emperor and replied, "Stand out of my light." In that moment, who was more powerful, Alexander, who needed to conquer the world to feel significant, or Diogenes, who needed nothing from anyone? Not even the world's most powerful man. Diogenes was a king in his own mind because his scorecard was entirely internal. He needed no applause, no validation, no favors. He was utterly and completely free. While we may not choose to live in a barrel, we can apply this principle in our own lives to wean ourselves off our addiction to applause. You can start by being more mindful of your use of social media. Recognize it for what it is: a massive, gamified external scorecard. Try posting something you believe in, and then resist the urge to check for likes and comments for a few hours. Feel the little pang of anxiety that comes from that, and then feel it fade as you realize that your well-being is not actually tied to that digital feedback. Practice saying no. Saying no to a request or an invitation that you would normally accept simply to please someone is a powerful exercise in valuing your own time and priorities over the approval of others. Even better, you can actively seek what might be called virtuous disapproval. Deliberately do something you know is right, but which might be unpopular. It could be as simple as respectfully voicing a dissenting opinion in a meeting when everyone else is agreeing, or refusing to participate in negative office gossip. Feel the discomfort of the group's subtle disapproval, and notice that you are unharmed. In fact, you will likely feel a surge of self-respect. Finally, focus your satisfaction on the process, not the praise. When you finish a project, derive your joy from the effort you put in, the focus you maintained, the quality of the work itself. That is an internal reward, a mark on your internal scorecard. Any praise that comes after is just an echo, a pleasant but unnecessary bonus. True freedom begins where the fear of other people's opinions ends. By consciously choosing to live by an internal scorecard, we take back the power we have given away. We become the sole judge of our own worth. This liberation is not an act of selfish withdrawal from the world. On the contrary, it is the necessary prerequisite to engaging with the world in a truly meaningful way. Once you are no longer obsessed with what people think of you, you are finally free to genuinely serve them. Not to win their approval, but because it is the right thing to do. This newfound freedom allows us to step into our roles as good parents, good neighbors, and good citizens, which is precisely the subject of our next exploration. The Stoic view of our social duty. Having freed ourselves from the invisible prison of other people's opinions. A common misunderstanding of Stoicism can arise. One might imagine that the goal is to become a detached, aloof figure, withdrawn from the messy affairs of the world, meditating alone on a mountaintop, indifferent to the fate of humanity. This image of the cold, emotionless Stoic could not be further from the truth. Stoicism is not a philosophy of retreat. It is a philosophy of engagement. It was not born in a monastery. It was forged in the heat of the Roman Forum, on the battlefields of Germania, and in the heart of the bustling, chaotic city. It is, at its core, a philosophy that asks not how to escape the world, but how to serve it virtuously and effectively. The Stoic does not run from their community. They run towards it, armed with the tools of reason, courage, and a profound sense of duty. The foundation for this deep sense of social responsibility is a core Stoic concept called oikeiosis. The word is difficult to translate directly, but it means something like a process of making something your own, or a natural sense of belonging and affinity. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles brilliantly illustrated this with the image of a series of concentric circles. At the very center is our own mind, our self. The first and closest circle contains our immediate family, our parents, siblings, and children. The next circle holds our extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Beyond that is the circle of our neighbors and fellow townspeople. Then, our fellow citizens. And finally, the last vast circle encompasses the entire human race. Hierocles said that the great task of a good person is to consciously and deliberately work to draw these outer circles inward. We should strive to treat our cousins as we treat our siblings, our neighbors as we treat our cousins, our fellow citizens as our neighbors, and ultimately, every human being on the planet as our fellow citizen, our brother, our sister. This is the practical, actionable exercise of sympathia. It is a call to relentlessly expand our sense of self until my own interest and the interest of all humanity become one and the same. From this perspective, acting for the common good is not just a nice idea. It becomes the highest expression of the virtue of justice. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself in his journal that human beings were born for community, that we are naturally social and cooperative creatures, made for each other like the two hands or the 2 feet of a single body. For one part of the body to act selfishly, at the expense of the others, is to misunderstand its own nature. Thus, a Stoic finds their duty not in some abstract, universal command, but in the specific roles and relationships that make up their life. You have the role of a parent, a child, a friend, an employee, a neighbor, a citizen. The Stoic's job is to fulfill the responsibilities of each of these roles with virtue. Your duty to the world is not out there somewhere. It is right here, in how you treat your family, how you perform your job, and how you interact with your community today. There is no greater example of this philosophy of service in action than the life of Marcus Aurelius himself. It is essential to remember that Marcus never wanted to be emperor. His personal passion, his dream, was to be a quiet scholar and philosopher. He wanted nothing more than to spend his days reading, studying, and contemplating. Yet, when fate and duty called him to lead the Roman Empire, he accepted the role without complaint or self-pity. He understood that this was the part the universe had assigned him to play for the good of the human swarm. His entire reign can be seen as a grueling, 20-year exercise in Stoic social duty. When famine struck, he sold off his own imperial jewels and palace furnishings to buy food for the people. He passed laws to protect the rights of the most vulnerable, including slaves, orphans, and widows. He would sit for days on end, patiently presiding over tedious legal cases, striving to be a source of justice for his people. He spent the last decade of his life away from the comforts of Rome, living in a military tent on the cold, dangerous frontier, leading his armies not for personal glory, but to protect the citizens of the empire from invasion. His life was a constant sacrifice of his own personal peace for the sake of the common good. He is the ultimate refutation of the idea that Stoicism is a selfish philosophy. But this raises a critical question. How is it possible to engage so deeply with the messy, frustrating, and often disappointing world of human affairs and still maintain your inner peace? How do you protect your inner citadel when you are on the front lines of public life? The Stoics answered this with a beautiful and practical metaphor: the analogy of the archer. An archer preparing to shoot does everything within their power to succeed. They select a good bow and a straight arrow. They check the condition of the bowstring. They take a firm stance. They carefully draw the bow. They aim with precision and focus. All of these things, the entire process of shooting, are within the archer's control. This is the sphere of virtue. However, once the arrow leaves the bow, the outcome is no longer up to them. A sudden gust of wind could push it off course. The target could unexpectedly move. An unseen branch could deflect it. The Stoic archer, therefore, does not define success as hitting the target. That is an external, an indifferent. The Stoic archer defines success as shooting well, with skill, focus, and dedication. Our social duty is exactly like this. Our job is to shoot well. We must strive with all our effort to be a good parent, a good leader, a good friend, a good citizen. We put in the work. We act with virtue. We aim for the common good. But the actual outcome of our efforts is an external, and therefore, not ultimately up to us. Our children may not listen. Our business may fail. Our political efforts may be thwarted. The Stoics' tranquility comes not from achieving a specific result, but from the secure knowledge that they have performed their duty to the best of their ability. The peace is found in the virtuous effort itself, not in the external applause or the successful result. This frees us to act boldly and righteously, without our happiness being held hostage by the outcome. You do not need to be an emperor or a president to practice this profound social duty. It is available to every one of us, every single day, in the small details of our lives. Being a good citizen is found in being a patient and loving parent. Even when you are tired, it is found in being a reliable and supportive friend, listening without judgment. It is found in being an honest and diligent employee, taking pride in your work for its own sake. It is found in volunteering in your local community, in coaching a children's sports team, in simply picking up a piece of trash that someone else has dropped. Every small action that places the needs of your immediate swarm on equal footing with your own is a deep and meaningful act of Stoic practice. It is the work of drawing those concentric circles of Hierocles just a little bit closer to the center. Stoicism, then, is not a retreat from the world. It is a recipe for how to save it, starting with your own character and your own community. This kind of service, however, often means navigating a world that is obsessed with material gain, which brings us to the unique and liberating Stoic perspective on wealth, luxury, and true prosperity. Having committed ourselves to being good citizens and serving the human community, we immediately collide with one of the most powerful forces in our modern world: the relentless pursuit of wealth and material prosperity. Our society screams a single, deafening message: that to be successful is to be rich, that happiness is found in the next purchase, that a good life is measured by the size of your house, the brand of your car, and the number in your bank account. We are taught to equate prosperity with possessions. But the Stoics invite us to pause and ask a radical question. What is the true nature of wealth, and what does it mean to be truly rich? Their answer provides a liberating and deeply peaceful alternative to the anxious chase for more. At the heart of the Stoic view of money is our foundational principle: the dichotomy of control. Wealth, property, luxury items. These are all classic examples of indifference. In the Stoic sense, this means they are not inherently good or evil. They have no power to touch your character, which is the only thing that is truly good. A person can be wise, just, courageous, and temperate, whether they live in a palace or a shack. Likewise, a person can be foolish, cruel, cowardly, and greedy in either circumstance. The money itself is morally neutral. It is simply a tool. What matters, what reveals your character, is how you use that tool. Wealth can be used for virtue, to help your family, to support your community, to create opportunities for others. Or it can be used for vice, to indulge in decadent pleasures, to lord over other people, to isolate yourself in a fortress of luxury. The money doesn't make you good or bad. It simply amplifies what is already there. A fascinating case study in this philosophy is Seneca. He was not only a brilliant Stoic writer, but also one of the wealthiest men in the entire Roman Empire. A fact that led many to accuse him of hypocrisy. How could a man who preached indifference to externals be so incredibly rich? But this criticism misses the subtlety of the Stoic position. Stoicism does not command you to be poor. It commands you to be indifferent to whether you are rich or poor, if wealth comes your way through legitimate means, as a result of your hard work or good fortune. You do not have to run away from it. The key test is your internal disposition towards it. Seneca's argument was that a true Stoic sage could have all the wealth in the world, and then lose it all overnight, and their inner tranquility would remain completely undisturbed. This leads to the crucial distinction between being the master of your wealth or its slave, the person who needs luxury, who cannot be happy without expensive food, fine clothes, and lavish surroundings, is a slave to their possessions. Their inner peace is fragile, constantly dependent on maintaining a certain level of external comfort. They are terrified of losing what they have, and so they live in a state of quiet anxiety. The true master of wealth, by contrast, can enjoy it when it is present, but feels no sense of loss when it is absent. They can drink water from a clay cup with the same inner contentment as they drink fine wine from a silver goblet. Their happiness is self-generated, and therefore, it cannot be taken away. This is the freedom the Stoics prized above all else. From this viewpoint, the relentless pursuit of an ever more luxurious lifestyle is not just a distraction. It is actively harmful to the soul. Firstly, it creates a cascade of new, artificial needs. Once you get used to sleeping on the finest sheets, a normal bed feels coarse. Once you get used to gourmet food, a simple meal seems bland. This is the hedonic treadmill, where you have to keep running faster and faster, acquiring more and more, just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. It is a game you can never win. Secondly, a life of constant comfort makes us weak. It erodes our resilience. When you are accustomed to perfect ease, any small hardship, a delayed flight, a broken appliance, a bad meal, feels like a major catastrophe. The Stoics believed in deliberately hardening the self against misfortune, and a life dedicated to luxury does the exact opposite. It softens us, making us more vulnerable to the inevitable pains of life. Finally, and most importantly, the immense time and energy spent acquiring, maintaining, and worrying about possessions is time and energy that is being stolen from what truly matters. Cultivating wisdom, strengthening relationships, serving your community, and fortifying your inner citadel. So, how do we practice this liberating indifference? Seneca gives us a powerful exercise. The practice of voluntary poverty. Despite his immense riches, Seneca would regularly set aside several days where he would intentionally live as if he were poor. He would eat nothing but simple bread or barley porridge, drink only water, and sleep on a hard mat on the floor. He did this not to punish himself, but for three very specific reasons. First, it was an exercise in premeditatio malorum. By experiencing a simplified life firsthand, he proved to himself that poverty was not some terrifying monster. He could not only survive, but be perfectly content with very little. This removed the fear of losing his fortune, which is the chain that keeps most people enslaved to their wealth. Second, it was a powerful gratitude practice. After a few days of eating stale bread, a simple piece of cheese and an apple would taste like a feast. It cured him of the disease of taking his daily comforts for granted. Third, it was an exercise in the virtue of temperance, a test of his self-control, proving to himself that he was still the master of his appetites. This practice reveals the true Stoic definition of wealth. Being rich is not about having a lot. It is about wanting very little. The person who has mastered their desires is infinitely richer than the billionaire who is tormented by the desire for another billion. The slave Epictetus, who owned nothing but his own mind, was freer and therefore richer than the Emperor Nero, who was a slave to his every whim and paranoia. The ultimate wealth is freedom. It is freedom from the anxiety of losing what you have. It is freedom from the desire to impress others with your possessions. It is freedom from the endless, exhausting cycle of wanting more. This is an inner state of prosperity, a richness of the soul that is available to every single one of us right now, regardless of our financial circumstances. The Stoic path is not a vow of poverty. but a vow of freedom. It is about understanding that your wallet and your soul are two entirely separate things by shifting our focus from accumulating external possessions to cultivating internal riches. The virtues of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. We find a form of prosperity that is stable, secure, and truly our own. This proper, detached relationship with our material world is crucial because it prepares us to face the most profound losses of all. The losses that cannot be replaced with money, the loss of those we love, and eventually, the loss of our own lives. This prepares us to look at grief and consolation through the clear, compassionate lens of Stoic philosophy. We now arrive at one of the most difficult and universal of all human experiences, a test that every one of us will face, and which can threaten to shatter even the most fortified inner citadel. We must talk about grief. The loss of a loved one, a parent, a spouse, a child, or a dear friend, is a profound and searing pain. It is the ultimate test of any philosophy, and it is here that the caricature of the cold, unfeeling Stoic, the man of stone who does not cry, does a terrible disservice to the wisdom of this philosophy. Stoicism does not forbid grief. The Stoics were not robots. They understood that sorrow, tears, and a period of mourning are natural, involuntary reactions to a profound loss. As Seneca said, "Let your tears flow, but let them also cease." The goal of a Stoic is not to inhumanly suppress the pain of grief, but to manage it with reason, to prevent it from metastasizing into a chronic, self-destructive despair that consumes the rest of our lives. To understand how a Stoic copes with grief, we must first diagnose the nature of overwhelming, prolonged sorrow, much-like anger. It is often fueled by a series of flawed judgments we attach to the raw pain of the loss. A huge component of debilitating grief is the element of shock. We feel that something unnatural, something unfair, something that should not have happened, has happened. We are stunned and shattered by the seeming randomness and cruelty of fate. But the practicing Stoic has been quietly preparing for this moment their entire life. Through the practice of premeditatio malorum, they have gently and regularly contemplated the mortality of those they love. They have always understood, on a deep and fundamental level, that their time with their loved ones is finite and borrowed. Epictetus advised that when you are kissing your child goodnight, you should quietly remind yourself that they are mortal, that they have been given to you for the present, not forever. This is not a morbid thought. It is an act of love and realism. It does not eliminate the pain of loss when it comes. Not at all. But it removes the paralyzing, reality-denying element of shock. You are not surprised by the fundamental nature of life. The other flawed judgment is that the loss is an unbearable catastrophe that has permanently ruined our life. We tell ourselves, "I can't go on. My life is over." The Stoics would gently but firmly challenge this judgment. The pain is real and immense, but our life is not over. Our capacity for virtue has not been taken from us. Our duty to the living remains. The world continues, and we still have a part to play in it. The most compassionate and practical guide to this process comes from Seneca, in his brilliant letter of advice. The consolation to Marcia. Marcia was a wealthy Roman noblewoman who, 3 years after the death of her young son, was still consumed by grief. She had withdrawn from society, refused all comfort, dressed only in black, and was essentially allowing herself to waste away, living as if she had died alongside her child. Seneca's letter is a masterclass in Stoic consolation. He begins not by scolding her, but by validating her pain. He acknowledges her tears and her sorrow as natural. He does not tell her to simply get over it. But then, he gently begins to appeal to her reason. He asks her to consider the nature of reality. Did you think you had given birth to a god? He might as well have asked. Did you not know he was mortal from the moment he was born? He reminds her that everything we have, including our children, is on loan from fortune, a fickle lender who can demand repayment at any time, without notice and without appeal. This is the deal we all accept when we enter into life. To rage against this, to be consumed by grief over it, is to rage against the very fabric of reality. Then comes the crucial Stoic pivot. Seneca instructs Marcia to shift her focus. Instead of dwelling on the single, painful moment of her son's death, he tells her to fill her mind with the memory of his life. He tells her to count her blessings, not her losses. Think, he urges her, of his sweet babble as a toddler, his boyish games, his eager mind as he grew, the joy he brought into her life for the years she did have him. Those years were a gift. To erase them with unending sorrow is to be ungrateful for the gift she was given. Instead of focusing on what was taken away, focus with immense gratitude on what you once had. Finally, Seneca reminds Marcia of her duty to her other living children, who need their mother, her duty to her friends and her community, and her duty to honor the memory of her dead son. And how is he best honored? Not by drowning in a sea of sorrow, which helps no one. The greatest tribute she can pay her son, Senecargus, is to live a good, strong, and virtuous life herself. It is to embody the virtues she had hoped to teach him, to live with the courage and resilience that he would have been proud of, to let his memory be a source of inspiration, not a source of despair. From Seneca's profound advice, we can distill a practical framework for navigating our own grief. First, allow the natural process of sorrow to occur, but set rational limits. It is not only okay, but necessary to cry and to mourn. But do not let grief become your new identity. Do not let it become, as Seneca warned Marcia, a shameful indulgence. Second, consciously practice the shift from loss to gratitude. When your mind is pulled toward the painful memory of their death, intentionally redirect it to a happy memory of their life. Keep their photographs around, not to remember their absence, but to remember the joy of their presence. Make a mental or even a written list of all the good things they brought into your life. Third, find meaning in your response to the tragedy. See this as the ultimate test of your character and your philosophy. Can you be a source of strength for others in your family? Can you live a life that stands as a testament to the love you had for the person you lost? And fourth, remember your remaining duties. Your life is not over. You still have a role to play. Fulfilling your responsibilities to the living is a powerful way to move forward and a beautiful way to honor the dead. The goal here is not to get over it, as if the loss never happened. That is impossible and undesirable. The person you loved has become a part of you, and they will always be there. The goal is to integrate the loss into the fabric of your life in a healthy and meaningful way. The scar will always remain, but it does not have to be an open, weeping wound forever. It can become a part of your story, a source of wisdom, empathy, and a deeper appreciation for the precious, fragile beauty of life. By accepting the reality of our loved one's mortality, we are better prepared to face the inevitable. This same logic must now be turned inward, to the ultimate contemplation of our own transient and finite existence. We must now look at the practice of memento mori. After learning to navigate the profound sorrow of losing others, we must now turn the lens of our philosophy upon ourselves and confront the most fundamental and often most feared reality of our own existence. We must talk about death. In our modern culture, this is a forbidden topic. We treat death as a failure, a morbid subject to be hidden away, spoken of only in hushed tones, and avoided in our thoughts at all costs. We are obsessed with youth, with extending life, with denying the inevitable. The Stoics, in their wisdom, took the exact opposite approach. They believed that a regular, calm, and clear-eyed contemplation of our own mortality was not a source of depression or fear, but was in fact the ultimate key to living a life of meaning, urgency, purpose, and even joy. They had a simple, powerful phrase for this practice: memento mori. Remember, you will die. This was not a morbid threat. It was an energizing and clarifying command. A call to wake up and to truly live. The primary power of memento mori is its function as the great clarifier. It is the ultimate tool for prioritization. When you hold your daily anxieties, your petty grudges, your frantic chase for status, your fear of public speaking, and your worry about what other people think of you up against the vast, silent backdrop of your own mortality, they are instantly revealed for the trivialities they truly are. On your deathbed, will you be lamenting a rude comment someone made to you in traffic 10 years ago? Will you be agonizing over the number of likes you got on a social media post? Will you be consumed with envy over your neighbor's bigger house? The answer is obviously no. The thought of death strips away the non-essential. It burns away the fog of triviality and forces you to confront the most important questions of all. Am I living a life I can be proud of? Am I being the person I want to be? Am I spending my precious, finite time on what truly matters? Memento mori is the ultimate cure for wasting the only life you have. There is a powerful and dramatic story from the ancient world that perfectly captures the spirit of this practice. It comes from the tradition of the Roman triumph. A triumph was the greatest spectacle in Rome, the highest honor that could be bestowed upon a military general. After a major victory, the general would parade through the streets of the city in a golden chariot, dressed like a king, with his victorious legions marching behind him and the spoils of war displayed for all to see. The crowds would cheer, throwing flowers, shouting his name, treating him as if he were a living god. It was the absolute pinnacle of worldly success, fame, and power. But, by tradition, standing in the chariot directly behind the triumphant general was a slave, and this slave had only one job. As the general soaked in the adulation of the crowd, the slave would hold a laurel crown above his head, and at the same time, he would lean in and whisper, again and again, into the general's ear. He would whisper the words, "Respais post ti, homining esse memento. Memento mori. Look behind you. Remember that you are only a man. Remember that you will die." This practice was a brilliant and powerful inoculation against ego and hubris. At the very peak of his glory, at the moment, he was most likely to believe he was invincible. The general was reminded of his own vulnerability, his own humanity, his own mortality. It was designed to keep him humble, to remind him that all this external glory was temporary. But his character, how he chose to live, was eternal. Memento mori is not meant to crush our spirit, but to ground it in reality, so that we may live more wisely. How then can we practice this in our own lives without becoming morbid? The Stoics were practical. You can place a simple reminder on your desk, a small skull, or a coin, or even a rock, an object that you can touch throughout the day to bring this reality to mind. You can use a wallpaper on your phone with the Latin phrase. The goal is not to dwell on it constantly, but to have these brief, regular check-ins with reality. More profoundly, you can adopt the Stoic mindset of approaching each day as if it were your last. This is a crucial point. This is not a call for hedonism or recklessness. They eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow we de attitude. For a Stoic, living as if it were your last day means the opposite. It means living with supreme care, attention, and virtue. If this truly were your last day on earth, would you waste it on petty anger or mindless distraction? Would you neglect your duties to your family and community? Or would you strive with every fiber of your being to be the best, kindest, most courageous version of yourself? It is a call to live with profound purpose, not with desperation. Marcus Aurelius did this by contemplating the great figures who came before him. Men like Augustus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. Where are they now? He would ask. Nowhere. Or nobody knows. If even these giants of history were consumed by time, then what of us? This thought puts our own lives, our own problems, and our own importance into a healthy and humbling perspective. When you begin to practice memento mori, you will discover that it bears the most unexpected and beautiful fruit. Firstly, it cultivates immense courage. As Seneca wrote, "He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave." When you have looked at and accepted the ultimate fear, the fear of your own annihilation, all the lesser fears that dominate our lives lose their power. The fear of asking for a raise, the fear of starting a new business, the fear of what others might think of you. They all become laughably small in the face of your own mortality. Secondly, it fosters a deep and powerful sense of gratitude. Just as contemplating the loss of a loved one makes you grateful for them, contemplating the end of your own life makes you profoundly grateful for the simple, the miraculous gift of being alive right now, the taste of your food, the feeling of the sun on your skin, the sound of a loved one's laughter. These simple experiences become charged with a sacred beauty when you remember that your time to experience them is finite. And finally, memento mori is the ultimate cure for procrastination. It lights a fire in your soul. You are on the clock. You have a finite number of sunrises left. Are you going to spend them pursuing your dreams, living by your values, and becoming the person you were meant to be? Or are you going to put it all off until a tomorrow that is never guaranteed? The thought of death is the great motivator, urging us to stop delaying and to start living. Right here, right now. So, memento mori is not a dark obsession with death. It is a bright, life-affirming celebration of the present moment. It is the secret ingredient that gives life its taste, its urgency, its meaning, and its beauty. By remembering that we will die, we finally learn how to truly live. And this intense, clarifying focus on the preciousness of the present moment leads us directly to the most fundamental operational task of a practicing Stoic, which is how to properly manage our thoughts and judgments in every single one of those moments. We must now examine the chief task in life, the correct use of our impressions. We have now arrived at the very heart of applied Stoicism, the engine room of the entire philosophy. If the principles we have discussed are the blueprints, this is the daily work of construction. If Stoicism is a form of spiritual combat, this is the fundamental fighting stance. The philosopher Epictetus called this practice the chief task in life, the main business of anyone who wishes to live wisely and well. It is the discipline of correctly handling our impressions. It is in this moment-to-moment practice that we take all the abstract ideas, the dichotomy of control, memento mori, amor fati, and apply them in the real world, in real time. Mastering this skill is the secret to moving from a life of emotional reactivity to a life of calm, rational, and purposeful action. To understand this, we must first look at the Stoic model of how we experience reality. It is a simple, three-step process. Step 1 is the event. Something happens in the world, outside of you. It starts to rain. Your boss sends you a critical email. Someone you admire gives you a compliment, in their raw form. These are just objective facts. They are neutral. They have no inherent meaning. Step 2 is the impression. This is where we come in. Our mind immediately and automatically generates a judgment or an interpretation of the event. The Stoics called this fantasia. It is the story we instantly tell ourselves about what happened. The rain has ruined my day. My boss thinks I am incompetent. This compliment means I am a brilliant person. Notice how these are no longer objective facts. They are subjective narratives, colored by our ego, our fears, and our desires. Step 3 is the emotion and reaction. Based entirely on the story we told ourselves in step 2. An emotion arises: annoyance, anxiety, pride, and this emotion, in turn, fuels our outward reaction. We sulk about the weather. We fire back a defensive and emotional email. We become puffed up with arrogance. For the untrained mind, these 3 steps are collapsed into one single, instantaneous, and seemingly involuntary event. The critical email arrives, and in the same nanosecond, anxiety floods the system. There is no space, no pause, no moment of reflection. But the entire work of a practicing Stoic is to pry open a space between step 2 and step 3. Our freedom, our power, and our peace all reside in that tiny, precious interval. The goal is to create a pause between the initial impression and our final ascent to it. Imagine your mind is a fortress, and your reason is the gatekeeper. Impressions are visitors who arrive at the gate, asking for entry. The untrained mind has no gatekeeper on duty. The gate is wide open, and any visitor fear, anger, despair, desire can rush in, plunder the stores, and cause chaos within the walls. The trained Stoic mind, however, has a vigilant and disciplined gatekeeper. This gatekeeper of reason stops every single impression at the gate and asks it a series of tough questions before deciding whether to let it in. What are these questions? They are simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. The first and most important question the gatekeeper asks any impression is this: are you related to the things within my control, or the things outside of my control? This is the immediate application of the dichotomy of control. If the impression is about something outside your control, another person's opinion, the weather, the past, the gatekeeper can immediately recognize it as something to be met with calm acceptance, not emotional investment. The visitor is politely acknowledged and sent on its way. The second question is, are you what you appear to be? This challenges the story you are telling yourself. Is this situation really a disaster? Or is it merely an inconvenience? Is that comment really a malicious insult? Or just a poorly phrased observation from someone who is tired or stressed? The gatekeeper's job is to strip away the emotional, catastrophic language and see the raw, objective event for what it is. And a third, related question, a favorite of Marcus Aurelius, is to command the impression. Let me see you stripped naked. This means breaking it down into its cold, hard, physical components, removing all the glamour or terror we have projected onto it. A gourmet feast is just the dead body of a fish, a bird, and a pig. A fine wine is fermented grape juice. An insult is just vibrations in the air, processed by my eardrums. This practice demystifies our impressions and robs them of their power to control us. Let's see how this works with a simple, everyday example: being stuck in traffic. The untrained mind experiences this as a single, painful event. The event is the traffic. The impression is, this is a nightmare, I'm going to be late. That driver is a complete idiot, my whole day is ruined. And the reaction is a spike in blood pressure, a hand on the horn, a stream of angry curses, and arriving at your destination, stressed and miserable. Now, let's look at it through the eyes of a trained Stoic mind. The event is the same. The cars are stationary. The initial impression might be the same flash of frustration. But then, the pause. The gatekeeper steps in and interrogates the impression. Question 1. Is the movement of these thousands of cars in my control? No. It is an external. Question 2. Is this situation truly a disaster? No. It is an inconvenience. Being late is not ideal, but it will not harm my character. It does not make me a bad person. Question 3. What is this? Stripped naked. It is a collection of metal boxes on a strip of asphalt. And because I am stationary, it is an unexpected period of free time. After this rational interrogation, a new, Reasoned judgment is formed. This situation is outside my control, and I will therefore accept it calmly. This is an opportunity to listen to my audiobook, to practice my breathing, or to call my mother. The resulting emotion is one of calm, and the reaction is to use the time productively. Same external event, two completely different internal worlds, with the only difference being the disciplined management of impressions. This moment-to-moment practice is the work. This is what it means to be a Stoic. It's not about being able to quote Seneca. It's about being able to pause when you feel anger rising. It's about interrogating your fear when you feel anxious. It's about challenging your desires when you feel envy. Like any skill, it is difficult at first. Your gatekeeper will be lazy. He will let visitors slip past. But with daily practice, with the constant review provided by your philosophical diary, the muscle gets stronger. The pause becomes more natural. The interrogation becomes faster. Eventually, the process becomes so ingrained that it is nearly automatic. You don't just have a philosophy. You live it. In every interaction, in every challenge, in every single precious moment of your life. Our inner world is not shaped by events, but by our judgments about those events. Mastering our impressions is the master key to unlocking a life of purpose, resilience, and unshakable tranquility. And this entire process of rational analysis depends on one crucial foundation: the clarity of the very words we use to form our thoughts. This brings us to the vital importance of precise language. Having learned to create a pause between an event and our reaction, to interrogate the impressions that knock at the gate of our mind, we must now examine the very language in which those impressions speak to us. We must look at the words themselves. For language is not merely a tool for describing our reality. It is the primary tool for creating it. The words we choose, especially in the silent monologue we have with ourselves, are the architects of our emotions, the builders of our inner world. Imprecise, dramatic, and catastrophic language will inevitably create an inner life of chaos and drama. But precise, objective, and sober language is the key to building a life of tranquility and order. Taming our tongue, and taming the tongue of our thoughts, is an indispensable part of taming our mind. This practice is the direct continuation of what we just discussed. The story, or the judgment that we attach to an event, is made of words. The reason an inconvenience so often feels like a catastrophe is because we use the word catastrophe to describe it. Our emotional reaction is almost always downstream from our linguistic choice. If you tell yourself a situation is unbearable, you will feel that it is unbearable. If you tell yourself it is merely difficult, you give yourself the space to handle it. We think our language describes our feelings, but more often than not, our language creates them. The central Stoic directive here is to strip our speech, both internal and external, of all this unnecessary drama. We must become vigilant auditors of our own vocabulary, seeking out and eliminating the words that inject emotional poison into our experience. Think of words like disaster, nightmare, terrible, horrible, or awful. Think of phrases like "I'm devastated," "It's the end of the world," or the classic "I can't handle this." These are not objective descriptions of reality. They are value judgments, and they are almost always wildly exaggerated. They are the language of powerlessness and victimhood. The strategy for combating this is simple, but not easy. It requires constant vigilance. The strategy is to replace this emotionally loaded language with plain, simple, objective descriptions of the facts. Let's run a few common scenarios through this Stoic language filter. Imagine you receive some harsh criticism on a project at work. The untrained, dramatic mind says, "My boss just ripped apart my presentation in front of everyone. It was a complete disaster. I'm so humiliated." The language itself creates the feeling of devastation. The trained Stoic mind, however, they would filter this and describe it with precision. I received some critical feedback on my presentation today. There are several points that need to be revised. Can you feel the difference? All the emotional heat has been dissipated. The first description leads to panic and despair. The second leads to a clear-headed plan of action. Let's try another one. Your flight gets canceled after a long delay. The dramatic mind says, "This is a nightmare. My entire trip is ruined. I can't believe this is happening to me." The Stoic mind describes the reality. The flight has been canceled. Now I need to find a new flight. One is a story about a personal tragedy. The other is a logistical problem to be solved. By refusing to use the language of catastrophe, you prevent the situation from becoming a catastrophe in your mind. You are separating the event from your judgment about it, and choosing the words for that judgment with surgical precision. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this practice, and he employed a particularly powerful technique we could call decomposition, to fight off either excessive desire for luxuries or excessive fear of physical things. He would mentally break them down into their most basic, unglamorous components, stripping them of the emotional labels our culture attaches to them. When he contemplated a fine Falernian wine, a famous luxury in his day, he didn't think of its status or its exquisite taste. He called it fermented grape juice. He looked at his own magnificent purple imperial robes, a symbol of ultimate power that cost a fortune to make, and described them as nothing more than sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. When thinking of a gourmet dish of roasted meat, he would visualize it as the dead body of a fish, a bird, or a pig. He even applied this to sex, describing it clinically as the friction of a membrane and the spasmodic ejection of a sticky fluid. Now, the point of this was not to be crude or to suck all the joy out of life. The point was to see things as they truly are, to see the underlying reality beneath the alluring or frightening stories we tell ourselves about them. It was a radical commitment to objectivity. It's a powerful tool for us as well. When you feel envy for someone's expensive sports car, remember that it is just a collection of metal, plastic, and rubber, designed for transportation. When you feel intimidated by a powerful CEO, remember they are just a human being, a collection of flesh and bone, who eats, sleeps, and will one day die. Just like you. This practice of decomposition is the ultimate expression of using clear language to see the world clearly. This commitment to clarity is more than just a psychological trick. It is a form of virtue. Speaking and thinking with precision is an expression of wisdom. It is an act of intellectual honesty. When we use vague and dramatic language, we are often engaging in a form of self-deception. We are trying to justify our own emotional overreactions. By saying a situation is unbearable, we give ourselves permission to fall apart. By calling it a disaster, we excuse ourselves from the hard work of finding a solution. Precise, objective language is a commitment to seeing and speaking the truth, both to others and, most importantly, to ourselves. It is a sign of a mind that is in control, a mind that refuses to be a victim of its own narration. You can begin to practice this today. For the next 24 hours, conduct a language audit. Pay close attention to the words you use, both in your head and out loud. When you describe challenges or frustrations, you might even keep a small notebook and jot down the dramatic words you tend to rely on. Are you always swamped at work? Is every inconvenience annoying? Is every piece of bad news terrible? Once you have identified these habits, you can begin the work of substitution. When you catch yourself about to use one of these loaded words, pause it. Challenge yourself to describe the situation using only plain, objective, verifiable facts. Your philosophical diary is the perfect training ground for this. When you review your day in the evening, consciously rewrite your experiences, stripping away the drama and replacing it with clarity. If our thoughts shape our lives, then the words that are the building blocks of our thoughts are of supreme importance. By choosing our words with the care and precision of a poet or a surgeon, We gain mastery over our inner world. We become the calm authors of our own tranquility, not the frantic victims of our own exaggerated storytelling. This disciplined, purposeful way of thinking and speaking, this commitment to seeing the world as it is, does not happen by accident. It is the natural result of having a clear and coherent philosophy of life, a personal code that guides your every thought, word, and deed. This brings us to a crucial question. Why does everyone, including you, need such a code? As we continue our journey, assembling the tools of Stoicism one by one, from the dichotomy of control to the practice of memento mori, a larger question begins to emerge. How do all these pieces fit together? What is the underlying framework that gives them coherence and power? The answer is that they are all components of a complete philosophy of life, a personal code for living. And this raises one of the most important questions anyone can ask themselves. Do you have a philosophy of life? Socrates famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living. By this, he meant that a life lived on autopilot, a life without conscious reflection on what is good, what is right, and what is important, is a life left to chance. It is a life lived on a kind of default setting. Most people, without ever realizing it, are running their lives on this default setting. Their philosophy is a messy, contradictory jumble of ideas absorbed unconsciously from their culture, from advertising, from their parents' expectations, and from their own fleeting emotional impulses. One moment, their goal is to pursue pleasure. The next, it is to accumulate wealth. The next, it is to gain social status. There is no coherent system, no internal rudder. They are like a ship without a captain, tossed about by the changing winds of external influence and internal whim. So the choice is not whether to have a philosophy of life. Everyone has one, even if it's just go with the flow or do whatever feels good. The choice is whether your philosophy will be a conscious, deliberate, and effective one, or a chaotic, reactive, and ultimately self-defeating one. This is where Stoicism presents itself not as the only possible philosophy, but as a uniquely robust, coherent, and battle-tested operating system for the human mind. Think of it this way. It is comprehensive. It provides a clear and integrated set of answers to life's biggest questions. What is the goal of life? To live with virtue and in accordance with nature. How should I handle adversity? By focusing on what I can control and accepting what I cannot. How should I treat others? With justice, kindness, and the recognition that we are all part of an interconnected whole. It is also time-tested. This isn't a new age fad or a pop psychology trend. It is a system that has been practiced and refined for over 2,000 years by everyone from slaves to emperors, in times of peace and in times of brutal war. And, most importantly, it is intensely practical. It is not concerned with abstract, unansurable questions. It is a collection of real-world tools, exercises, and mental models designed to produce a tangible result in your life: tranquility, resilience, and a solid sense of purpose. For the most powerful and undeniable proof of what a chosen philosophy can do for a person in the face of unimaginable adversity, we must turn to the story of Vice Admiral James Stockdale. Stockdale was not a professional philosopher. He was a U.S. Navy pilot, a man of action. But as a graduate student at Stanford, he had briefly studied the Stoics, and the lessons had stuck with him. In 1965, during the Vietnam War, his plane was shot down over North Vietnam as he was parachuting down from his cockpit. Watching the village streets below, he knew he was about to be captured and enter a world of pain and torture. In that terrifying moment, he said to himself, "I am leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus." For the next 7.5 years, Stockdale was a prisoner of war in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. As the highest-ranking naval officer, he became a leader among the American prisoners. He faced years of torture, brutal beatings, and crushing solitary confinement. His captors had total control over his body, his food, his environment, his entire external world. Yet, Stockdale survived, and he helped his men survive. Not through false optimism or wishful thinking, but by consciously and deliberately applying the principles of Stoicism he had learned years before. He used the dichotomy of control to separate what his torturers could do to his body from what they could never touch his mind. His will, his character. He established a code of conduct for the prisoners based on the Stoic virtues of courage, justice, and duty, helping them to maintain their honor and resist their captors' efforts to break them. When he was told he was to be paraded in public as propaganda, he disfigured his own face with a wooden stool and a razor, so he could not be used as a well-treated example. This was the act of a man whose philosophy told him that preserving his integrity was more important than preserving his physical appearance or avoiding pain. James Stockdale explicitly credited his survival and his ability to lead his men with honor to the cold, hard, practical wisdom of Epictetus. His philosophy was not a comforting bedtime story. It was a lifeline. It was a weapon. It gave him a framework to make sense of suffering, a reason to endure, and a code to live by when everything else was stripped away. His story is the ultimate proof that a philosophy is not a luxury for quiet times. It is an absolute necessity for difficult ones. So, how do you begin to move from a default philosophy to a deliberate one? How do you craft your own code? You don't have to be a prisoner of war to benefit from this. You can start today. First, you must study. You cannot build a coherent code out of thin air. Read the original Stoic masters. Read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations to see a man coaching himself. Read Seneca's letters to see a wise mentor guiding a friend. Read Epictetus's discourses to hear the bracing, no-nonsense lectures of a former slave who achieved ultimate freedom. Find the passages that resonate with you, the ideas that feel true in your bones. Second, use your philosophical journal to ask yourself the big questions. What do I truly value? What is my definition of a successful life? What is my duty to my family, my community, the world? Write down your answers. Argue with yourself on the page. Third, and most importantly, you must test your philosophy in the laboratory of your daily life. The next time you face a small frustration, a moment of anxiety, or a temptation, try to consciously apply a Stoic principle. See if it works. See if it gives you a sense of calm and control. A philosophy that remains only on the page is useless. Finally, understand that this is a lifelong process. Your personal philosophy is not a statue you carve once and then display forever. It is a living, breathing thing. You will constantly refine it, adapt it, and deepen your understanding as you gain more life experience. A life lived without a consciously chosen philosophy is a life left to the whims of fortune. By deliberately selecting a code to live by, a system like Stoicism, you seize the rudder of your own mind. You give your life a coherent purpose, a reliable internal compass that can guide you through any storm. And one of the most important navigational decisions that this compass helps you make is the crucial choice of who you allow to influence your journey. This brings us to the vital topic of the company you keep. Having established the importance of a personal code, a philosophy to guide our lives, we must now turn our attention to one of the most powerful and often underestimated forces that shapes our ability to live by that code. This force is the company we keep. Human beings are permeable creatures. We are social sponges. We cannot help but absorb the attitudes, the habits, the mindsets, and the emotional states of the people with whom we spend the most time. Your inner circle is not just a collection of friends. It is a reflection of your future self. The conscious, deliberate, and strategic choice of your influences is therefore not a minor detail of a philosophical life. It is a critical and decisive act. The right company can be a powerful tailwind, accelerating your progress and holding you to a higher standard. The wrong company will be a relentless headwind, sabotaging your best efforts and dragging you back into the very habits of thought and action you are trying to escape. The Roman philosopher Seneca was uncompromising on this point. He saw the danger of bad company not as a minor risk, but as a clear and present threat to the soul. In his letters, he issues stark warnings against the corrupting influence of the crowd and the unthinking majority. Associate with those who will make a better man of you, he advised his friend Lucilius. He compared going into a large crowd for entertainment to coming back from the gladiatorial games. You always return, he said. More greedy, more ambitious, more cruel. The crowd has a way of lowering our standards, of appealing to our baser instincts, of making vice seem normal and even attractive. He argued that negative mindsets are contagious. Like a disease, you cannot spend your time in a plague ward without running the risk of getting sick. And you cannot spend your time with people who are cynical, greedy, or undisciplined without having those qualities seep into your own character. This means that a practicing Stoic must become a discerning and strategic curator of their social environment. This is not about becoming an arrogant snob or judging others from a position of superiority. It is a simple act of self-preservation, of protecting your own tranquility and the progress you are working so hard to achieve. We must first learn to identify the types of influences we should consciously limit our exposure to. First, there is the chronic complainer, the person who lives in a state of perpetual victimhood. They see only the negative in every situation and believe they are powerless pawns of fate. Their entire mindset is the polar opposite of the dichotomy of control. And their constant negativity is a drain on your own energy and resolve. Second, there is the gossiper, the person who thrives on talking about the faults, failures, and misfortunes of others. This habit is toxic. It fosters cynicism. It distracts you from the crucial task of working on your own flaws. And it lowers the entire tone of your interactions to one of petty negativity. Third, there is the person who is completely oriented towards external things, the hedonist or the materialist, who constantly encourages indulgence, excess, and the chase for money and status. They will not understand your pursuit of inner goods and will actively undermine your attempts to practice temperance and simplicity. Finally, there is the cynic or the scoffer, the person who mocks your desire for self-improvement, who scoffs at the idea of philosophy, and who sees your pursuit of virtue as a weakness or a joke. These people are actively hostile to your growth and should be avoided, like the plague Seneca described. But it is not enough to simply avoid negative influences. We must proactively seek out positive ones. Seneca's advice was to choose a Cato, to pick a role model of virtue, either living or historical, and to keep them in your mind as a standard. In any difficult situation, you can ask yourself, what would Marcus Aurelius do right now? Or how would a person of true wisdom and courage handle this? This gives you a constant source of inspiration and a benchmark for your own behavior. We should actively seek out friendships with people who embody the qualities we wish to cultivate in ourselves. Find people who are disciplined, wise, courageous, and just. These are the friends who will not just flatter you, but will challenge you, hold you accountable, and inspire you by their own example. And remember, this is a two-way street. As you make progress on this path, it becomes your duty to be this kind of positive influence for others. You must strive to be the kind of friend you yourself wish to have. The story of the founding of Stoicism itself is a testament to this principle. Zeno of Citium, the man who started it all, was a wealthy merchant on a voyage across the Mediterranean. His ship was caught in a violent storm and he was shipwrecked on the shores of Athens. He lost everything: his ship, his cargo, his entire fortune. Destitute and alone in a foreign city, he wandered into a bookstore. There, he began to read a copy of Xenophon's Memorabilia. a book about the life and teachings of Socrates. He was utterly captivated by this portrait of a man of incredible wisdom and unshakable character. When he finished, he turned to the bookseller and asked the question that would change his life and, in turn, Western philosophy. He asked, "Where can I find men like these?" He wasn't asking for another book. He was asking for a living teacher. A real-life example. At that very moment, the famous cynic philosopher Crates happened to be walking past the shop. The bookseller simply pointed his finger and said, "Follow him." Zeno did exactly that. He became a devoted student of Crates, shedding his old identity as a merchant and dedicating his life to the pursuit of wisdom. Zeno lost all his material possessions but found true riches because he made the conscious, deliberate choice to seek out and follow a wise influence. He understood that the right teacher was more valuable than a whole fleet of ships. Of course, we cannot always choose our company. We have family members, colleagues, and neighbors who may be negative or difficult, and whom we cannot simply cut out of our lives. In these situations, Stoicism offers a different set of strategies. First, instead of meeting their negativity with anger or frustration, we can view them with a kind of philosophical pity. We can understand that they are acting as they do out of ignorance, not malice. They simply don't know a better way to live. This protects our own inner peace from their toxic behavior. Second, we can reframe our interactions with them. We can see them as our philosophical sparring partners, our virtue trainers. A complaining coworker becomes an opportunity to practice our patience. An insulting relative becomes a chance to practice our composure and refusal to be offended. They are the resistance that makes our spiritual muscles stronger. And finally, the best way to influence them is not by preaching or arguing, but by quietly living your philosophy. Let them see your calm in a crisis. Let them see your kindness in the face of their negativity. Let them see your resilience in the face of setbacks. Over time, your example will be far more powerful than any lecture you could ever give. We are the curators of our own minds, and that curation must extend to the people we allow to influence our thoughts and emotions. Choosing our company with care is a fundamental act of self-respect and a critical strategy for living a good life. But what if the wisest and most virtuous people are no longer alive? The Stoics had an answer for this too. They knew that, through the magic of reading, we could be in the company of the greatest minds in history at any time we choose. This brings us to the importance of being a lifelong student. Having recognized the profound impact that our chosen company has on our character, we must now expand our definition of company. What if you could choose as your mentors the wisest, most courageous, and most brilliant minds that have ever existed? What if you could have a personal conversation with an emperor, a celebrated playwright, or a former slave who became one of history's most influential teachers? Anytime you wished. This is not a fantasy. This is the promise and the power of reading. In our modern world, we are often conditioned to think of education as a finite process, something that ends with a diploma or a degree. But for the Stoics, and for any truly wise person, learning is a continuous, lifelong pursuit. Reading, for them, was not a mere hobby or a pleasant pastime. It was a vital necessity, a form of spiritual nourishment, a medicine for the soul, and the primary way to keep company with greatness. The Roman philosopher Seneca beautifully captured this idea. He noted that we cannot choose the parents we are born to, but through reading, we can choose the minds we wish to be born from. We can, he said, choose to be adopted into the family of the most exalted geniuses in history. Through the magic of the written word, we can transcend time and space. We can listen as Socrates questions the citizens of Athens. We can receive personal letters of mentorship and consolation from Seneca. We can sit by the campfire on the northern frontier and read over the shoulder of Marcus Aurelius as he writes in his private journal. These are the greatest mentors anyone could ever ask for. They are infinitely patient, They are always available. They will share their most profound, hard-won wisdom with you without asking for anything in return. To neglect this opportunity, to leave these great minds sitting unread on the shelf, is to choose to navigate the difficult path of life alone when you could be walking with the wisest guides who have ever lived. It is crucial, however, to understand the purpose of this kind of reading. The goal is not simply to accumulate knowledge, but to acquire wisdom. There is a vast difference between reading to know and reading to live. A person who reads to know collects facts and quotes like a squirrel collects nuts. They can win arguments at dinner parties. They can sound intelligent, but their life and their character remain unchanged. This is what Seneca called being a mere bookworm. The Stoic reads to live. They approach a book not as an intellectual puzzle to be solved, but as a manual for life to be applied. They are searching for practical tools, actionable principles, and transformative insights that can help them become a better, calmer, and more virtuous person. We must read philosophy the way we eat food. We don't just admire a meal or analyze its chemical makeup. We ingest it, we digest it, and we allow it to become a part of us, to give us strength and nourishment. A philosophical lesson that remains just a highlighted passage in a book is useless. A lesson that is absorbed, internalized, and acted upon becomes a part of your very soul. To achieve this, we must read actively, not passively. This means reading with a pen in your hand, or your finger ready to highlight. It means engaging in a dialogue with the text. Underline the passages that strike you like a lightning bolt. Write your own thoughts and questions in the margins. Argue with the author if you disagree. The more you engage with the text, the more deeply you will absorb its lessons. A powerful, time-honored technique for this is the practice of keeping a commonplace book. This is a single journal or notebook where you transcribe the most powerful quotes and passages you encounter in your reading. The very act of writing a passage down by hand forces you to slow down and consider its meaning more deeply. Over time, this book becomes your own personalized collection of wisdom, a unique anthology of all the ideas that have shaped you. A resource you can turn to for guidance and inspiration for the rest of your life. But the final and most important step is always application. After reading a chapter from Epictetus about handling insults, you must go out into your day and make a conscious effort to practice that technique the next time you feel slighted. After reading a meditation from Marcus Aurelius on the shortness of life, you must take a moment to truly feel the urgency and preciousness of your day. A lesson not applied is a lesson not truly learned. For those wanting to start this journey, the Stoic canon can seem intimidating, but it essentially rests on three towering and intensely accessible figures. If you want to see Stoicism in action, raw and unfiltered, read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Remember, it is the private diary of a man under immense pressure, coaching himself on how to be better. It is a book about application. If you want a wise and compassionate mentor to guide you, read Seneca's Letters from a Stoic. These are personal, practical letters of advice from a brilliant and experienced friend, covering everything from managing grief to finding joy. It is a book about guidance, and if you want a no-nonsense, tough love coach who will strip your illusions away and force you to focus on what truly matters. Read Epictetus's discourses and his handbook, The Enchiridion. As a former slave, his philosophy is intensely focused on the core principle of finding freedom through the dichotomy of control. It is a book about training. Seneca liked to think of his library as a kind of philosophical clinic, a hospital for the soul. He knew that just as we go to a physician for our physical ailments, we should go to the great philosophers for our mental and spiritual troubles. Are you feeling anxious about the future? Epictetus has a prescription for that. Are you struggling with anger? Seneca has written a powerful treatise on its cure. Do you feel overwhelmed by your duties and responsibilities? Marcus Aurelius has a remedy. The books on your shelf are not just inanimate objects. They are the preserved wisdom of the greatest physicians of the soul who have ever lived. To open their pages is to book a consultation with the best doctors in history. A commitment to being a lifelong student, to keeping company with these great minds through reading, is a hallmark of a wise and flourishing life. It is how we continue to gather new tools, how we check our own progress against the highest standards, and how we continue to fortify the walls of our inner citadel. And this constant pursuit of wisdom is what prepares us to face life's inevitable challenges, not as victims, but as students, ready to turn every adversity into our greatest source of strength. This brings us to the ultimate Stoic alchemy, the idea that the obstacle is the way. We have arrived at the culminating principle of our Stoic practice, the master key that unlocks the entire philosophy and transforms it from a defensive strategy for enduring hardship into an offensive strategy for thriving on it. This is the idea that turns the lead of adversity into the gold of character. It is the understanding that within every obstacle lies a hidden opportunity. It is the profound and paradoxical wisdom captured in the words of Marcus Aurelius, who wrote to himself in the midst of war and plague, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not just a clever turn of phrase. It is the formula for a life of exceptional resilience, creativity, and power. Think of this as a kind of mental alchemy. The average person, when confronted with an obstacle, a difficult boss, a financial setback, a sudden illness, a betrayal, sees it as a roadblock. It is a source of frustration, a reason to complain, a justification for quitting. Their progress is halted. But the Stoic mind, the alchemical mind, sees that same obstacle as raw material. It is the fire that forges the steel. It is the pressure that creates the diamond. The Stoic understands that external events themselves are neutral. They are just circumstances. It is our response, our mindset, that transforms that neutral circumstance into either an insurmountable wall that crushes us, or a stepping stone that lifts us higher. This alchemy is not a mysterious talent. It is a disciplined, three-step process. The first step is the discipline of perception. It is the ability to see the obstacle with clarity and objectivity, free from the distortions of fear, panic, and catastrophic language. This is where all our previous training comes into play. We must manage our impressions, refusing to assent to the initial story that this is a disaster. We must use precise, objective language to describe what has happened, not what we fear will happen. We must take the view from above, putting the problem in its proper cosmic perspective to shrink its emotional size. A person who cannot control their perceptions will be controlled by the obstacle, but the person who sees it clearly for what it truly is, a challenge, a problem to be solved, a new set of facts on the ground, has already taken the first and most important step toward overcoming it. The second step is the discipline of action. Once we see the obstacle clearly, we must act. But this action must be strategic, creative, and relentlessly focused on what is within our control. We cannot waste our energy raging against the parts of the situation that are unchangeable. Instead, we must ask, given this new reality, what is the next right action I can take? Often, the obstacle itself forces us to be creative, to find a new path we never would have considered before. It closes the well-worn road, forcing us to venture into the forest where new discoveries are made. The action required is often not one grand, heroic gesture, but a series of small, persistent, and deliberate steps. We simply focus on the process, on doing the next right thing, and then the next, and then the next, chipping away at the obstacle until it is dismantled or we have found a way around it. The third and final step is the discipline of the will. This is our inner fortress, our ultimate trump card. After we have perceived the situation clearly, and after we have taken every wise and courageous action within our power, there may still be parts of the situation we cannot change. The outcome may not be what we hoped for. This is where our will comes in. This is where we practice amor fati, the love of our fate. We must accept the final outcome, whatever it may be, as necessary and even good. The will is the part of us that says, I have done everything I can. I accept this result. I will endure it with grace, and I will find the good in it. The world can block our actions. It can frustrate our plans, but it can never, ever break our will. Our choice to respond with courage, patience, and cheerfulness. For a stunning real-world example of this principle in action, we can look to the story of the discovery of penicillin. In 1928, a bacteriologist named Alexander Fleming was working in his lab in London. He was, by all accounts, not a particularly tidy scientist. He went on vacation, leaving a stack of petri dishes containing Staphylococcus bacteria on his lab bench. When he returned, he saw that one of the dishes had been contaminated with a fungus, a common blue-green mold called Penicillium notatum. From one perspective, his experiment was ruined. The contamination was an obstacle. The average scientist would have been annoyed, cursed their sloppiness, thrown the ruined dish in the trash, and started over. They would have seen the obstacle as nothing more than a roadblock. But Fleming's mind worked differently. He applied the discipline of perception. Instead of just seeing a spoiled experiment, he paused, and he looked closer. He observed with curiosity. He noticed something strange. In the area immediately around the invading mold, the bacteria had been completely wiped out. He saw not a problem, but a phenomenon. Then, he applied the discipline of action. He didn't throw the dish away. He took the creative next step. He isolated the mold, began to cultivate it, and started studying the mold juice it produced to figure out what was killing the bacteria. His persistent action turned a random accident into a focused investigation. And the result, that ruined experiment, that obstacle of contamination, became the way to one of the greatest breakthroughs in medical history. The discovery of penicillin has saved hundreds of millions of lives. The obstacle was not in the way. The obstacle was the way to a world-changing discovery he wasn't even looking for. We can apply this same three-step framework to the obstacles in our own lives. Are you dealing with a difficult boss? Don't just see them as a monster. That's a failure of perception. See them clearly as a flawed human being with their own insecurities. Then, take action. Focus on doing your job with impeccable excellence. Learn how to manage them more effectively. And finally, apply your will. Accept that their personality is outside your control. The obstacle of your boss then becomes a training ground for developing patience, professionalism, and supreme emotional resilience. Did you suffer a major financial setback? Perceive it not as a moral failure, but as a new set of numbers on a page. Take action by creating a strict budget, finding new sources of income, and cutting expenses. And exercise your will by accepting the new reality and finding contentment and joy in simpler, non-material things. The obstacle then becomes a profound lesson in temperance and the true nature of wealth. This is the great alchemy of the Stoic path. Obstacles are not to be feared or resented. They are to be welcomed. They are not punishments. They are lessons. Every single challenge life throws at you is a unique and tailored opportunity to practice a specific virtue. A rude person is a chance to practice patience. A scary risk is a chance to practice courage. A complex problem is a chance to practice wisdom. A moment of unfairness is a chance to practice justice. When you truly internalize this mindset, your entire relationship with life changes. You are no longer afraid of what might happen, because you know that whatever happens, you can use it. You can turn it into fuel. You understand that the path to growth is not a smooth, paved road, but a rocky, challenging trail. You understand that the obstacle is not in your way. The obstacle is your way. And this powerful, life-altering mindset is the final, essential ingredient in achieving the ultimate goal of all our striving. A a state of human flourishing and inner harmony that the ancient philosophers called eudaimonia. We have now traveled the long and winding road of Stoic philosophy. We have learned to distinguish what is and is not in our control, to love our fate, to rehearse for misfortune, and to remember our mortality. We have learned how to build an inner citadel, how to live by the compass of the four virtues, how to see ourselves as part of a cosmic whole, and how to turn every obstacle into an opportunity. We have gathered all the tools, and so, we must now ask the ultimate question. What is the grand purpose of all this work? What is the destination to which this entire path leads? The ancient Stoics had a single, beautiful, and powerful word for it: eudaimonia. This word is most often translated into English as happiness. But that single word is tragically weak and misleading. In our modern language, happiness usually refers to a fleeting, positive emotion. It's the excitement of a new purchase, the pleasure of a good meal, the temporary joy of a victory. These are wonderful feelings, but they are entirely dependent on external events, and they come and go like the weather. This is not what the Stoics were aiming for. The word eudaimonia is far deeper, far more robust. Let's break it down. The prefix eu means good or well. The root word, daimon, does not mean demon in the modern sense, but rather refers to one's inner spirit. That divine spark of reason that the Stoics believed was a fragment of the cosmic logos residing within each of us. So, eudaimonia literally means something like having a good inner spirit, or living in a way that is on good terms with your own inner divinity. Better translations might be human flourishing, a life of excellence, or living in accordance with your highest nature. It is not a fleeting mood. It is a durable, stable, and deeply satisfying state of being. Crucially, eudaimonia is not a goal you can pursue directly. It is a byproduct. Think of physical health. You don't become healthy by simply wanting to be healthy or by thinking happy. Healthy thoughts. Health is the natural, inevitable result of a series of consistent, daily actions. It is the byproduct of eating nutritious food, getting regular exercise, and ensuring you have enough sleep. You focus on the right actions, and health is the reward. Eudaimonia is the health of the soul. It is the byproduct that naturally and inevitably arises when you consistently and diligently practice the disciplines of Stoicism. You focus on living a life of virtue, and eudaimonia is the serene and resilient state that emerges as a result. Let us now see how the entire system we have explored works together to produce this state of flourishing. You begin by laying the foundation with the dichotomy of control, which gives you clarity and stops you from wasting your precious energy on things you cannot change. Upon this foundation, you build your core attitudes. You practice amor fati, learning to love and accept everything that happens. You use premeditatio malorum to prepare yourself for adversity, and memento mori to fill your life with urgency and purpose. With these attitudes, you begin the construction of your inner citadel, that unbreachable fortress of peace in your mind. To navigate the world outside that fortress, you rely on the unwavering compass of the four virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Your worldview is expanded by sympathia, the understanding that you are an integral part of a larger whole, which informs your sense of duty and compassion. You maintain this entire system through your daily habits. You review your progress in your philosophical diary, and you vigilantly manage your impressions before they can become destructive emotions. You use precise language to see reality clearly. And most importantly, you have learned the alchemy of turning every obstacle into the way. When all of these parts are working together, when you are consistently applying these principles in your daily life, the result is eudaimonia. It is a state of profound inner peace, a quiet confidence that you can handle whatever life throws at you. It is a sense of living with purpose and integrity. It is the freedom from the turbulent emotions of anger, fear, and anxiety. It is the deep satisfaction of living a life of excellence. To truly grasp the feeling of eudaimonia, consider the analogy of a master craftsman. Imagine a master potter, sitting at her wheel. Her hands are covered in clay. Her focus is absolute. The world outside her workshop fades away. She is not thinking about the money she will make from the pot, or the praise she might receive for it. Those are externals. Her deep, quiet joy comes from the process itself. It comes from the feeling of her skilled hands shaping the clay with precision and grace. It comes from the deep satisfaction of applying her craft with excellence, of being fully engaged in a meaningful and disciplined activity. This is the feeling of eudaimonia. It is not about reaching a final destination called the good life. It is the profound contentment that comes from the process of living life itself as a craft. It is the joy found in skillfully applying the art of living to every situation you face, moment by moment. It is the satisfaction of knowing that you are using your reason, your virtues, and your will to shape yourself into the best possible human being you can be. Therefore, eudaimonia is not a static state of perfection you arrive at one day. You are never done. It is the ongoing, lifelong process of striving. The good life is the life of striving to be virtuous. The tranquility and the flourishing are found on the journey, not at a final destination. It is the ultimate prize of the Stoic path. A deep, abiding peace and resilience that is completely independent of your wealth, your health, your status, or any other external circumstance. It is the result of patiently and persistently building a life of virtue. One day, one action, one thought at a time. And now that we have reached the summit of our philosophical exploration, all that remains is to look back on the path we have traveled, to summarize our journey, and to offer some final words of encouragement for the road ahead. We have traveled a great distance together on this journey into the heart of Stoic philosophy. We began by learning to draw the most important line in the universe, the line between what is up to us and what is not. We learned to accept the things we cannot change with a loving embrace, to practice amor fati, while preparing our minds for any eventuality through the art of premeditation. We have laid the blueprints for our own inner citadel, a fortress of tranquility built from reason and principle. And we have learned to navigate the world with the unwavering compass of the four virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. We have seen that the obstacle is not in the way, but that the obstacle is the way, and that the ultimate goal of all this striving is eudaimonia, a state of profound human flourishing, independent of the chaos of the outside world. This is not just a collection of interesting ideas. It is a complete, integrated toolkit, a practical operating system for thriving in the midst of the 21st century. If there is one single, essential message to take away from our entire exploration, it is this: peace is not the absence of the storm. It is the calmness of the soul in the midst of the storm. The world will never be free of turmoil. People will continue to act irrationally. Fortune will continue to be unpredictable. Sickness, loss, and disappointment will continue to be a part of the human experience. The promise of Stoicism is not a promise of a perfect, frictionless life. It is the promise of a perfect, unshakable inner peace, right in the middle of our imperfect world. Tranquility is not a place you can travel to, a purchase you can make, or a relationship you can find. It is not something that happens to you. It is something you build. It is the result of a choice, a commitment, and a daily practice. It is the quiet reward for the hard work of building your own character. And so, we leave you with this. Do not be overwhelmed by the scope of this philosophy. You do not need to master everything at once. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Choose one thing, just one. Perhaps today, you will simply practice the pause, creating a tiny space between an impression and your reaction. Perhaps tonight, you will write just one sentence in a journal, asking yourself, Did I live by my values today? Perhaps you will simply choose one moment to remember memento mori, to look around you and feel a surge of gratitude for the precious, fleeting gift of being alive. The path to a better life is not a giant leap. It is a series of small, consistent steps, taken every single day. The work begins now, in the very next moment, with the very next challenge you face. The power to forge your own peace, to build your own citadel, to live a life of virtue and meaning, has been within you all along. We have merely handed you the tools. Now, go and use them.